He snatched a huge red tomato, grinning at that rich color. Then his smile crashed when he took one bite and realized it was way too sour. And he swore that next time he'd chase a sweeter harvest, right as someone suddenly turned to look at him. A gorgeous girl with adorable pointed ears runs up in a swish and calls him Mr. Asagi, telling him everyone else is here and they've been waiting on him alone while she clutches a basket of huge red tomatoes in her right hand. He whips his head toward her and locks eyes, and then the guy nods like he's on board, promising he'll come right now. Asagi fires himself up and tells himself he's done settling, he's going to carve out a better life starting right now. Empire of Remorse, Castle of Remorse. Its halls are packed with shining armor and endless nights, and right there, a man calls out to the boy by name. He declares, "Starting today, I'm stripping him of his role as court alchemist." And the protagonist's eyes snap wide with shock as he stares at the man, stunned. Asagi blurts out, stunned, "Why would you decide that?" The guy just shrugs, saying he handles the court alchemist duties just fine, and he's shocked Asagi even bothered to ask. He says the court alchemist's true job is forging magical weapons for war, and the young man stares back in pure shock. Curious, the head of the Imperial Alchemy Department snaps that the boy skips his work duties and just digs in the dirt, then stares at the scroll in his hands with pure indifference. That kid flat out refuses him and snaps back that it isn't some company planted in the ground. Asagi yanks his right hand into the sleeve at his kaftan, and the Imperial Alchemy Department's head watches every move. The guy pulls out a tiny bag, grips it in his hand, and practically demands that you take a look. He swears he uses alchemy to grow agricultural crops. With bags cradled in his hands, he points them out, voice blazing with excitement, eyes burning with rage, and tells everyone he grows varieties that can still thrive even in land so barren it looks dead. He snaps, saying through the difference in his voice that this is total nonsense, and if there isn't enough food, then it should be taken by force. With one hand propping up his chin and the other thrusting forward, he believes this is the most effective way to do it. Rage is shaking through the boy as he crushes his left hand tight around a bag of seeds, using all his strength, thinking he's had enough of everything. The Ramirez Empire is a ruthless, militarized machine that rose by aggression and conquest, so they pour massive human power straight into their war effort. He's convinced those reckless policies crush people. He still remembers hungry kids starving in the streets, and that's why he decided to save this country by cracking the food problem with alchemy. The head of the Imperial Alchemy Department suddenly jolts up from his seat, slams his hands on the table, and admits he's been skipping his duties to farm inside the castle walls, then declares this reckless behavior ends right now. Asagi presses him, "So you're stepping down from your post?" This young guy tells himself he's been hitting his quota, but the second he realizes he's just a regular orphanage kid, he gets looked down on like he's nothing. Asagi still swears he was only doing what needed to be done because he's convinced alchemy isn't meant to crush lives, but to bring people real happiness. Asagi glares at his ex-boss, pure rage burning in his eyes. Then Garius twists halfway around and declares, "You're free." The man twists his whole body around, fixes the young guy with cold indifference, and snaps that alchemists must obey in complete silence. The guy glares with pure disdain, thinking the department head treats alchemists like nothing but tools, and then he answers in a tight, restrained voice. Yeah, he gets it, before accepting the order. The main character strides through a deserted city, slipping past rows of mismatched houses, then steps into a building marked with a sign that reads, Sagi's Workshop. Right by the door, he slips off his outer garment, and the same girl pops back in, calling him Mr. Asagi as she greets him with a bright, "Good morning." Mercia, the maid from the beast race with those adorable ears and a back ponytail, steps up with a wooden tray and a cloth, flashes a cute smile, and asks him how his day's been. Asagi gazes at her with pain in his eyes, strides into the room, and slings his jacket over his right arm only to freeze, stunned that she's already here. Mercia works as a court servant, but when there's a lull between jobs, she jumps into this workshop to help out, and one guy can't stop remembering all the time they've shared. To grow crops without draining the soil, they teamed up and hammered out research here. Then the protagonist slumped into a chair, let out a heavy sigh, sad as it gets. The girl caught his mood and just stood there, utterly confused. She leans in with a shaky, concerned voice, eyes blazing with worry, asking if something's been gnawing at him. Then the girl blurts, "What happened?" And the main character goes stone-cold silent. He starts pouring out everything that happened to her, voice heavy with sorrow, and Mercy blurts out in shock, staring at him like, how is that even possible? Rage flares across her face as she declares that Mr. Asagi worked for the Empire's good, yet the girl can't swallow it. So she clenches the paper in her right hand until it nearly creases, then slams her other hand on the table. He's completely thrown off by her massive overreaction, so he holds his hands out in a peace offering and tries to calm her down. But Marcia is still blazing with rage, snapping. "So, are you mad?" He speaks in this calm voice and admits, "Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't furious." But the moment she recognizes him, that's all he needs. And then he adds that, on the bright side, everything's still okay. Mercy's eyes widen with shock. The protagonist gratefully thanks her for worrying so hard, and because he's an orphan, he's been alone for years. With a grin, the guy drops his hand right over her chest and tells her he's thrilled she became his friend. Then she blushes hard. Looking up as she calls him by name, she blurts, all excited, "So what are you gonna do now?" While he rubs his left cheek with his index finger, totally baffled, and admits voice shaky that getting fired hit him out of nowhere. So he hasn't even got a plan yet. The protagonist taps his chin with 2 fingers, deep in thought, wondering if the orphanage kids will be happy to see him again, and if he'll be able to work and survive there. Then the girl just stares at him. Her cheeks flare red, and she crosses her arms tight, panicking over what she's supposed to do. Then an idea suddenly sparks, and with a shaky voice, the girl nervously suggests he head to her homeland. The protagonist snaps his head toward her in shock, stares in total confusion, and blurts out in disbelief, "Wait, what do you mean?" Mercy blurts out, pushes her hands forward, and insists she never meant anything by it, then tells him she's only trying to give him a change of scenery. Her ears drooping and her tail snapping straight up with every jolt of her owner's motions. Isagi knits his brows as her words hit him, hands sliding to his chin, while he weighs her wild idea trading familiar fields for a trip to her homeland just to change the scenery. The protagonist blurts out that, as far as he can remember, her homeland is the Beast Kingdom. Then he spins a mental map of the Rimmer's empire. And showing beastmen make up 80% of the people. And the girl snaps, "Yeah," confirming it only to add that it's nothing more than a little village out on the outskirts. Hizaki beams that she invited him, but his eyes flicker with doubt like, can he really be useful? Before he can finish thinking, Mercia lunges right up to him and blurts out a confident yes, no hesitation at all. She crosses her arms tight against her chest, frowns with intensity, and tells him, in a serious voice, that if they've got an alchemist like him with them, everything's about to get way better. Then the guy stares back in shock, totally stunned, calling her by name. Mercia tells them their village is stacked with natural resources, yet the food situation keeps sliding downhill year after year. And when she talks about her homeland, the forests, the mountains, and the animals that roam there, you can feel the longing hit hard. He says that the moment she offered to help with his research, she lit up and told him she wanted to make life easier for everyone by growing crops that could thrive even in miserable, poor soil. He remembers his promise once he's done with these seeds. He'll ship them straight to the homeland of Mercia, and he stares at the bag on the table, lost in thought. Isagi suddenly realizes he just wrapped up this very culture research and hauled in a mountain of data, so the main guy cups his hands to his mouth, stares in deep focus, and starts thinking it through, while the girl watches him in sheer confusion. The boy rubs his chin, knits his brows, and stares like he's plotting how it could grow on any patch of land. Then the protagonist snaps, "I get it," and Mercia whips her head at him, stunned. He snatched the bag off the table, whipped his head toward the girl beside him, and stared her down with a confident smirk and a hard frown. Then he promised he'd go to her homeland. With arms spread wide, light bursts around him as he locks eyes with the girl, determination blazing. He tells her they might finally be able to use the cultures they forged. Then he flashes her a smile and lays out the plan. If they can pull off food abundance, they'll spread that success across the whole world. The girl steps in closer, meets his smile, and thanks him with total sincerity. Her smile vanishes in an instant. She goes deadly quiet, anxiety clawing at her, and after a moment she asks if he's really sure, leaving him staring at her in confusion, like he has no idea what she's talking about. The girl clamps her hand over her mouth, baffled out of her mind, then glances aside, and blurts that with what he can do, and all the different options he brought, he'd be useful anywhere in the world. But when he stares back, confusion hits him hard, and he reminds her, "You invited me here yourself." The girl's cheeks flush as she blurts an apology for that proposal she only just made, then snaps her hand over her mouth and admits she blurted it out in pure, unstoppable enthusiasm. The guy says it's better to take a neighbor's hand than stay tied up. Powerless then, he reaches out to her, swearing that if they move freely, they can shake the whole empire and change everything. With a grin, the protagonist presses his right hand to his chest. Isagi tells her she didn't just back him up in his research. She always stood by him. And now, as a thank you, He's ready to return the favor by helping her. He asks, "Can't I do it?" And then little tears spill into Mercy's eyes, so she wipes them away with her left hand. The protagonist tells her that if that's the case, he'll pack up and head straight for the kingdom of animals. The girl nods back with a sweet smile, like everything's finally falling into place. She blushes, then says, "All right, if you're quitting too, I'm in. I'll come with you." He grins, yanks out his huge bag, starts stuffing his stuff in, and nods right along. "You got it. We'll meet up later." The girl is about to step out, softly humming under her breath. Then the young man snaps into understanding, and he freezes on the spot, staring at her like he can't believe what he just heard. Isagi suddenly bursts out of his own workshop, yells at the girl, and demands she wait while she's already stepped into the city street. Then she whips around, stunned, and can't help asking herself what just happened. The protagonist refuses to believe she'll just quit and follow him. Then Mercia shuts that down hard, saying she can't leave him alone. The protagonist leans in, voice heavy with worry, and asks if she's truly sure she wants to quit her job, because he swears the palace gig is elite and the pay isn't small at all. And when he finishes, the girl just flashes him a smile. Her cheeks flush as she hooks her palm to her chin, and Mercia, smiling softly with her eyes half closed, says that now he's the one worrying about her, just like she's been worrying about him. The protagonist lets out a breath of relief and meets her eyes. Then he says, "Take mercy on me, let's go together." And the girl nods yes without even hesitating. A few days later, the heroes are ready to bolt out of the city just as they hit the gates. A carriage rumbles through behind them, driven by a stern coachman. The girl leans in fast, tells him to keep it quiet, and asks if he needs anything at all. Isagi Nache's on the same page as her. With a small, steady smile, he stares ahead and calmly tells him, "I packed both water and food in the magic bag, so no problems are coming." The girl grips the straps of her gigantic backpack behind her back and glares at that cursed little alchemy shape it's magically become. Because somehow it fits way more than anyone would ever expect. Mercia stares at him and says it'll take about a month to reach the Beast Kingdom, then warns them the road ahead will be long and brutal. So she tells him to savor it anyway, and when he glances back at the castle looming beyond the walls, he lets out a sorrowful look and agrees. Isagi leaned toward the round window, grinning like she just found a secret. Her mouth dropped open in pure shock, and the girl beside her mirrored the same amazed smile, staring out too, while two men rode alongside them, one calmly reading a book with it held right in his hand. They kick off on September 12th, then again on September 17th, and they roam the city streets. The main character locks eyes with the girl and japs his index finger forward toward the massive tower looming ahead. On September 28th, they set up camp in the countryside and crack a tiny fire right beside it. Then Mercia sinks in close to the burning sticks, surrounded by stones, while Isagi pushes a steaming glass of hot liquid into her hands, and it fogs up with rising steam. On October 7th, they're back on the road, rattling through the night in a carriage. Marcia leans in and begs the boy to wake up, and Isagi finally groans as he forces his eyes open, staring at his friend's silhouette cutting through the darkness. The girl tells the protagonist they finally arrived. Isagi rubs the sleep from her eyes with her left hand, then stares out the window at the landscape like it's still half a dream. The protagonist jolts awake, gasps that he's finally in the homeland of Mercia, then stares wide-eyed at the non-stop streets as beastmen flood past. This is the kingdom of beasts, the village of Plumina. Right when they get dropped off, the protagonist freezes in shock at the huge crowd of beastmen, spins around the streets, and can't believe what he's seeing. Even though they're on the outskirts, this is still the kingdom of beasts, and Isagi and Mercia just stare at the beastmen. They spot a buff bowman grinning as he carries a bucket of water in his left hand, while his right shoulder bears a pole loaded with more buckets. Behind him, a girl fights tooth and nail to tug a goat forward, her hands yanking a rope cinched around its neck. A little farther off, a woman is inspecting a merchant's shovel, while nearby a rabbit-eared guy grips a cage with a rooster inside and suddenly spots them. Then right beside him, a girl scrambles to catch a chicken. Mercy pushes him toward her house, but he balks and snaps back should they greet the headman first. And in the same breath, he can't help wondering why some strange man just dropped in out of nowhere. The girl snaps, "Don't worry, our headman is my dad," and stares him down with a serious face. Then she presses her right hand to her chest, and the protagonist shocked blurts out a loud, incredulous question. He snaps that she should have told him way earlier then. Mercia grins, shuts her eyes, and apologizes, saying she just wanted to surprise him so she stayed quiet. The boy blurts out what he should do, admitting he's freaking out while Isagi panics, worried he'll accidentally tell everyone he doesn't need any alchemists. The girl steps in and steadies him, assuring him everything's fine. With a dead serious face, Mercy clenched her fist and warned him, "Say one more thing like that, and she'd sock him. Teach him a lesson real quick." And the guy behind her just stood there, totally baffled, trying to figure out if she'd really meant she was going to hit him. The girl swings her hand toward the house and yells for Isagi to come over. Then he follows right behind her until, after a bit, they reach a huge place. She turns to him and says, "We're here, and this is my house." Mercy races back in before he can enter and tells him she'll talk to her father and mother. First he nods, fully understanding. And the girl reaches for the door handle. Out of nowhere, a smiling woman lunges into view. Glowing with joy about her return, she announces, "Mercy is back." The girl blurts, "Mom," and scolds her for popping out like that because it totally scared her. Meanwhile, the guy just stares, stunned. When the protagonist bursts into Mercy's house, surprise slams him. Because right there, an enraged man glares like he's ready to bite. And Isagi quickly realizes it's Mercy's father, radiating cold hostility from every breath. The man waves him over to the bench right across from him, with his wife sitting beside Mercia, while Isagi bows politely, saying sorry with real sincerity for bothering him. The protagonist blurts out, stammering a bit, that he's thrilled to finally meet them. And then the guy jumps in saying he's from the Remers Empire before introducing himself. Alchemist Isagi, Mercy's father, snaps in out of nowhere, barks at him to shut up, and the poor boy jumps in shock, eyes wide, while the man roars that he'll never hand his daughter over to some guy with shady origins. The protagonist storms in totally lost, blurting out a confused question. He has no idea what they're even talking about. Then the village elder snaps again, rage blazing in his voice, claiming that Mercia is his precious daughter and that the other guy is just some stranger who showed up out of nowhere. Right in the middle of it, Mercy's mother cuts in with a warm smile and declares she likes him an awful lot. Right on cue, her husband's yelling snaps off and he stares at her in total confusion. Like, wait, what? The protagonist is so embarrassed, he blurts out an apology and begs for forgiveness. While Mercy as mother smirks and announces she's finally brought a man into the housemaking. The woman assumes it must mean he's already decided everything. Out of nowhere, Mercia rockets up from her seat. Everyone freezes in shock. Then she turns crimson, clutches the hem of her dress, and blurts out that everything's wrong because she didn't mean to be misunderstood. She was trying to introduce Isagi as the new resident of their village. Her father freezes in shock, staring at his trembling daughter and the man standing beside her, while the wife next to him gives an awkward little smile. The man blushes, clears his throat, and insists they start over. Then he introduces himself as Kelsey, the head of this village. The old elder leans in and asks if he wants to move to their village, and Isagi flashes a kind smile. Then he nods and says yes, but with one request, let him run his alchemist work there. Mercy's parents go completely quiet, like they can't even process what he just said. His dad's mouth hangs open for a second, while his mom's face twists into a frown. Mercy stares at them, worried and confused, and can't figure out what just happened. Mercia stares at Isagi and figures her parents don't even know what alchemy is. Isagi's eyes widen in shock. The man rubs the back of his head, grimacing as he admits, "Yeah, it's true." And he hates that it is. Now it all clicks for Isagi. He shoots back, asking if they've ever met an alchemist. The girl tells him alchemists are rare around here, and before anything else, the main character decides he has to break down exactly what an alchemist is. He grins and tells them the truth: alchemists can command matter with magic, reshaping what stuff is made of and even transforming its structure through their power. He says it's brutal to create something that strays far from the original and still keep the quality, but he insists it's an unbelievably practical craft. Then the girl's parents glare, fall quiet, and won't respond. The girl insists it's all just too complicated for them to grasp, so she pushes for a hands-on demo instead. Then the guy looks at her and admits she's right. The protagonist strides up to Kelsey and asks to borrow the sword hanging at his belt, and Kelsey nods right away. So the protagonist peers at that blade up close, like he's studying it for answers. Kelsey fires a question at him, and he smirks that it's a great manatee he snagged the other day until the guy snaps back, "There's no manatee in that dagger," and the man explodes in rage, demanding it again. The protagonist claims alchemists can peer past the surface and reveal a material's true nature, and this low-grade metal looks just like manatite and namatite. The girl daydreams about a dodgy merchant selling fake weapons and swearing they're magical. Then the man snaps in fury, shouting that it'll cost exactly 20 silver coins. He yanks off his gloves, keeps gripping the sword, and speaks with rock-solid confidence everything's fine, and he'll remake it into a dagger from real manatite. Mercy's mother gasps again, eyes wide as she thinks, while Mercy's father stares in shock at the idea of turning his sword into something priceless, then demands to know exactly how he plans to pull it off. The hero grips the sword, and a glowing magic circle snaps into place around it. Then the blade erupts in light. The girl's parents stare in shocked awe, stunned by everything he's doing. He figures the dagger won't budge until he reshapes it, shifts its weight, rewrites its structure. So he hammers it with magic, pushing through endless manipulations as he focuses harder and harder. With a genuine grin, the main character hands his friend's parents the dagger he reforged with magic and tells them it's all set. He snatches the weapon in his hands, stunned eyes locked on the guy, and blurts out, "Wait, is this a dagger made of real manatite?" Then Asaji tells him, "Send a stream of magical power through it and we'll know." And the man erupts in shocked amazement. Kelsey pours a surge of magical power into the new weapon, and the moment it kicks in, her mouth drops and her eyes go wide with shock, while the man stares at the dagger like he can't believe what he's seeing. He spots a target sitting on the wall behind the main character, then with a burst of raw strength snaps his new weapon into a single sharp throw and hurls it straight at the bullseye, all while saying he just wants to test it. The dagger hits its mark, yet the village elder is left stunned as it rips through the target and blasts a hole in the wall. Then the man cranes toward the window and gasps, spotting the dagger still jammed in the ground outside. Kelsey's cheeks flare up as she smiles and says, "It's cool." But right behind him, his wife snatches his left shoulder and, with a fake grin plastered on, asks what he thinks he's doing. The man whips around and freezes. He's legit scared of her, stammering that he didn't realize he was that powerful. The woman's terrifying aura surges. She cracks her fists and growls not to use excuses, and Kelsey pleads for forgiveness. The protagonist is horrified and totally thrown off, then blurts out an apology saying he should have warned them first. The guy can't undo something like that in a blink, so Asaji reaches behind his backpack and pulls out a piece of wood. After a while, the wall locks into place perfect and unbroken, like a target hanging right where it belongs. The girl grins and says it's cool, and the main character shoots back a thanks. Then the guy flicks his magic and pops a chunk of wood right off the log. He tells him that alchemists can do it, and all he wants is to farm with alchemy. Then the man stares him down, dead serious, and says, "Yeah, but this land is barren. You can't farm. There's no point." The protagonist gapes at him, like, "Wait, I knew it." And the man says he's got the answer. Isagi explains it's why the mountain and forest resources keep shrinking, and the man is totally baffled, asking how he found his way all the way here and somehow already knew. The protagonist locks eyes with the village chief, determination blazing, then slaps his left hand to his chest and declares, full of fire, that he's here to fix the food crisis. Using alchemy to make it happen, Kelsey pressed a hand to her chin, eyes narrowing in pure confusion, and stared at him seriously. Then the boy confessed he'd heard from Mercia about the village's crisis, and he was determined to make farming work again by using alchemy-enhanced improved varieties even on that awful poor soil. Isagi says he wants to cut down the number of starving people to just one is enough. The man weighs every word, and right then, the girl springs to her feet. Mercia snaps that if they keep things the same, the wealth of the mountains and forests will keep shrinking. The girl stared her parents down with pure determination and yelled that, for the sake of the village's future, they had to let her learn farming powered by Lord Asagi's alchemy. Kelsey shuts her eyes and smirks, and the man admits it isn't blind faith, he just figures he's got a shot. The village elder then glances at his beaming wife and promises he'll grant him permission. The protagonist stares in total shock, mouth hanging open, completely thrown off. Then Mercius leans in beside him with a grateful smile, and the two of them sincerely thank Mercius's parents. The man shoots a look at his wife as she scribbles on a scroll, telling her Asagi needs his own house, and that they'll get him a place with tons of space. Then the wife passes the scroll straight to their daughter. She orders Mercia to hand over his seed to claim a free house, and the girl nods like she's totally got it, accepting the scroll on the spot. Then she whips around with a bright smile and beckons the guy to come with her. Inside the palace, he felt trapped, but out here, he can finally do whatever he wants, throwing his whole heart into his favorite work. Mercia and Asagi stroll down the street, and from around the corner, a girl watches them like she already knows exactly who they are. The girl beside him strides forward, and together, they leave the village's edge behind, heading straight for the forest while he's already picturing it. With alchemy, he'll turn this village into something breathtaking. They stride down a winding forest path, and the girl points ahead like she's revealing treasure. Your home is right here. They push through the trees together, and the guy feels it. This is where his new life starts. He stares forward at the place waiting for him, eyes blazing with anticipation. But right there, in front of the girl and the boy, stands a tiny old house. Half its roof is gone. And they stare at it, totally baffled. Mercia clutches the paper up in front of her, then gasps and knits her brows as she stares at the building ahead, while Seiji looks totally lost, asking if this is really his new home. The girl snaps that the place is a run-down, crumbling dump, radiating pure menace as she grips a crumpled piece of paper in furious hands. She's furious because he's trying to force Mr. Asagi to live in that nightmare. Her shadowed companion stared at her, totally stunned and low-key terrified. Then it hit him. The man said the house was kind of old and warned him that Kelsey would. Mercy snaps around and screams that she won't let this happen, rage boiling as she clenches her fists and fights the urge to tell him everything, while Asagi throws both hands forward in a calming gesture and insists, "It's all fine." The girl snaps her head toward him and flat out disagrees, her eyes blazing with pure determination as her brows knit together. Then she lets out a shy blush the moment she meets the young man's gaze. Asagi clenches his left fist and snaps that if a house can't be lived in, you don't just fix it, you rebuild it, and then he tells her it's exactly how an alchemist thinks. With a grin plastered on his face, he confesses he's always wanted to build a dream house, and the girl fires back again, stunned, as she asks about it. Back when he worked as a court alchemist, they shoved him around because he was just a nobody from an orphanage, so he figured that was the reason he lived in a tiny studio that looked exactly like a giant warehouse. The main character grins at the house and vows he'll build something he truly loves. Then the girl drops her hands, nods, and agrees with a tinge of sadness in her voice. The protagonist presses his gloved palm to the house's rotten wood, staring at it like it might still hold together, and he can't help but question whether it's truly useless just because it's falling apart. While the girl watches every move like she's reading his mind, he starts peeling off his gloves because the man wants to rip down this house first house the crumbling wreck with fierce resolve. A sharp grin pulling at his face as a slight frown tugs at his brow. Then he raises his hand and unleashes a steady stream of magic. A glowing magic circle blooms around his palm, and with a flick of power he starts twisting the tree itself. Then the wood instantly changes, cracking and shuddering as it jerks in every direction. Eventually, the whole building caves in, and all that's left are scattered sticks right behind him. The girl stares in shock. The guy wipes sweat off his forehead, breathes out, and grins, while the girl can only blink, totally bewildered. She snatches a couple of boards and flings them over her shoulder, clamping them in her hand, while Mercy grins at him and promises she'll tidy up the scattered boards. He blurts it out in shock, but in his head he's all confused like, these boards are seriously heavy? Then he drops into a crouch and digs through his bag. The protagonist says he's finally ready to wipe out the weeds to set up the plot. Then he jolts something's in his bag and snaps, "Found it," as the guy pulls out a hybrid herbicide. Asagi used alchemy to completely rework the product's composition, then cranked up its power until it hit like a rocket. Now the protagonist starts blasting it onto the grass in his plot. With a burst of energy, the main character says, "Everything's fine," and pushes himself and the girl to start building the house, while Mercia stares at him and wipes the sweat and fatigue off her face with her left hand. The protagonist yanks a huge wooden stick out of his magic backpack, stares it down with a tight frown, and right beside him, the girl pulls out another stick from that same magic bag. She blurts out his name, eyes wide with shock and worry, just as Asagi drops hard to the ground under the crushing weight of the stick. He shouts in panic, then they pull out the entwood he managed to rip from that plant monster. The protagonist taps the tree with his alchemy, and boom, a magic circle blooms around his hand as he pours power into it to jack up its durability, while Asagi fires up floating levitation magic and lifts a whole bunch of different sticks straight into the air. He sweeps a bunch of wooden pieces into place with his hands, eyes locked in, and soon he's building the foundation of his brand new dream house. The girl beside him stares at it in shock, eyes wide and mouth slightly agape, while the guy grins because it finally feels like nobody's holding him back anymore. With laser focus blazing in his eyes and a tight furrow in his brow, he keeps hammering his dream home to life. With magic this time, he raises the walls, frames the windows, and starts stacking the roof. He's got the perfect building plan locked in his head, and he gleefully brings it to life. He already built the doors, so now all that's left is following through on the plan, finishing everything by sealing it with the roof. Asagi beams and says it's all set, then spreads both hands wide as he stares at his brand new, beautiful house. Not far behind him, his girlfriend takes it all in too. He squinted into the bright glare, raising his right hand to shield his eyes, while his left hand hung at his side as he stared at the building. Ahead then, the girl crossed her arms and told him, eyes shining with pure admiration, that it was excellent. They kick off their shoes and step into the main character's brand new building. The guy hangs back, a bit shy, and blurts out, did you go too far with this? She snaps her hand to her mouth, pure shock, big admiration, and a little blush hits her face. Mercy snaps her gaze to him and grins, saying she finally gets what his dream house looks like. Then she runs her fingers over the kitchen tables, and he watches her with pure joy lighting up his face. He climbs the stairs to the second floor and sweeps it open like a surprise tour for her, and she just stares in shock. Then they even stumble on the bathroom in his new house. The protagonist says he'll probably fix up a normal workplace later, and Asagi turns to the girl and asks for help, moving his furniture around the house. Then Mercia grins, shuts her eyes, and tells him to trust her. With a heavy sigh, the protagonist pulls one chair from his bag and realizes that's all they've got, so the guy drops it beside the table and mutters that if you stare at it this way, it's like they brought zero furniture at all. The girl flashes a bright smile and says nothing can be done, since that warehouse is too cramped, no space at all. And the guy, still crushed by it, remembers his old job, buried under piles of papers, and reluctantly agrees. Suddenly, her ear twitches. Then she hears a voice calling her, asking if she's there, and Mercy bolts out of the house, stunned to realize the caller is her mother. She stares ahead, gasps, and clamps a hand over her mouth, then whips around to her daughter and blurts out, "Was there a house this amazing back in our village?" Mercia tells her that he completely remade the house with alchemy, drowning the old misery in comfort so they could live better then. Her mother's jaw drops and she blurts that alchemy is seriously awesome. The protagonist looks a little embarrassed, scratches the back of his head with his right hand, and shakes it off. Then he blurts out an apology like, "Sorry, I'll change everything here on my own terms." The woman steps in with open hands, smiling warmly, and says, "It's totally fine." She shoots him an awkward apology for barging in out of nowhere, then blurts that she wants to help clean up so he can move in immediately, only to cringe when she realizes there's actually nothing to clean up at all. He beams and tells her how much her concern means, and she grins right back, asking if she can see the house from the inside. Then he smiles wider, says yes, and invites her in. Mercy's mother bursts through the door, giddy with wonder, because the boy had built this place a while back, and as she drags her hand across the table, she marvels at how stunning it is, then points out that the kitchen is downright massive. Her daughter just watches in calm silence, and the protagonist says nothing. Then he suddenly jabs a finger toward the kitchen shelf behind the girl, telling her it's way too high for her, and she whips around stunned. Mercy rises on her toes, eyes locked and focused, stretching her right hand toward the shelf like she's determined to grab it. She's so confident she swears that if she keeps stretching, she'll make it. The guy behind her looks totally lost and warns he's going to shorten her. Then he snaps into action, casting alchemy. A glowing magic circle blooms around his hand, and right as he's about to hit, the girl shoots forward and grabs the door handle. The woman asks, "Isn't it beautiful?" and then boasts that once every utensil is laid out, this kitchen will blow theirs out of the water, right as the girl beside her fires off a brilliant idea. Meanwhile, Asagi, not far away, turns beet red, scratches her head, and flings her hand back. Mercia blurts it out, whips around to her mother, and throws both hands together in a desperate plea, asking if they've got any unused furniture or household stuff, and if they can haul it over here. A little later, Mercia plants her hands on her hips and stands right in the middle of the main character's fully furnished kitchen, and she says it feels cozy in here now. The guy starts to open his mouth, stunned. With that spark in his eyes, the main character grins, says it's cool, and thanks her, because somehow, it started to feel like home. She glances away, quiet and composed, and admits she's glad. Marcia scans the room again, frowns at the bare walls, and blurts that she wants to hang something there. Then she stares at the table like it's begging for a vase. He stares at her, stunned and lost, eyes wide with disbelief, and she leans her head to the side, shuts her eyes with a sweet smile, then tells him to drop everything and eat dinner right now. The girl pulls out a huge cauldron, sets it down on the table with a napkin first like she means business, and Versailles tells him their mother's cooked something delicious, so they can finally dig in. Then the young man's mind snaps back to her. The girl grins and flips open the cauldron's lid, and the main character freezes eyes popping wide, mouth gaping as he blurts out in awe that it looks absolutely delicious. The guy realizes it's milk soup and goes, "Wow, this is amazing," while the girl rushes to apologize for serving something so modest. Isazi soothes her, smiling and saying she just wanted to eat something like this, and the girl thanks him for it. On pours one portion of Mercy, the tray hits the table loaded with Sienna's special creamy mountain herb and mushroom soup, and right beside it sits warm bread pulled straight from the magic bag. With a grin blazing across his face, the protagonist grabs a spoon, ready to dive into the milk soup, while the girl stands behind him, quietly wishing him a good appetite. Then Asagi swivels around, staring at her in total shock. Isagi whips his head toward her, worry written all over his face, and asks if she'll eat with him. Meanwhile, Mercia turns bead red, and her tail shoots up in sizzling smoke from how flustered she is. She whipped her head away and shrieked that she was a servant and could not sit at the same table as him. And the guy just stared, stunned, until he told her, "Hey, this isn't the castle anymore. Nobody's going to scold you." With wide, shocked eyes, the girl stares at him and blurts out, "Can I really join in?" He whips his head toward her and smiles. "Yeah, let's eat together." The girl hugs her hands to her chest, tilts her head, and blushes bright red. Then she grins, sparks of joy in her eyes, and thanks him for letting her come along. Mercia and Asaki sit at a set table, milk soup and bread waiting in front of them. And the protagonist laughs right away, smiling as he points out that she's sitting opposite him, in a way that somehow feels totally unusual. Paint splattered all over her, the girl stares him down and blurts that she feels the exact same way. She can't calm her nerves unless he's near. He just smirks and says, "Yeah, that checks out," then urges her to fight down that feeling instead. He thanks her again for the food. The girl nods and accepts it. Then he lifts the spoon, blows on the milk soup just to cool it off, and finally slides the spoon into his mouth. Isagi's eyes go huge with shock, and she blurts out that it's insanely delicious. Then the guy chimes in, saying the sweetness of the milk basically blooms in your mouth. He blurts out to Mercio, "What's that plant on your spoon called?" And she grins, telling him it's creecut grass, a wild green that grows all over the nearby forests. And she even swears it tastes insanely good. He takes one bite in his head and goes, "That stem's crispy, and those boiled leaves feel soft." Then he imagines the grass in every form, and decides it's probably delicious whether it's boiled or fried. He even studies how those mushrooms taste, how the salty bacon hits, and how it all clicks with the milk's soft sweetness. Then he swears he can feel each product and picture every bite. He chomps a piece of bread with pure delight, plunges it into the milk soup, and lingers on the magic of it all, how it soaks up every drop, turns tender, and slips right into his mouth. The girl watches the happy guy grin as he devours his lunch, and relief washes over her. Then the main character announces he's full, leaving a bare, empty plate in his wake. The girl grins and says she's happy he liked it, then snatches up every dish, stacks them on one tray, and takes them away, while Mercia smiles and promises she'll wash them herself. He pushes back, insisting it's pointless and that he'll clean everything himself, while the young man tells him bluntly that she should go back home because she's only just returned to her homeland after all this time. She clutches a filthy dish to her nose, stares him down like it's a promise, and swears she's staying, no jokes. He freezes, eyes wide, totally stunned, blurting, "Wait, what do you mean?" Then he asks if she really wants to stay here for the night. She declares she's staying here to serve him, slams her hands on the table, and stares him down. Then the protagonist freezes, shocked out of his mind, and a huge blush bursts across his face. He tells her, voice buzzing with excitement, to wait and holds his hands out like he's trying to make peace. Then he asks if she gets it that this isn't the Imperial Palace anymore, and he's not a court alchemist anymore. And she nods, saying yes. Mercy folds her arms across her chest and, with pure confidence, tells him she'll serve him as long as his heart wants it. No one will sway her. Then the protagonist opens his mouth, shocked, staring at her in disbelief. Asagi panics, scrambles for the right words to convince her, and then blurts out that he has to build her a bedroom only, to immediately admit he can't do it right now. She tells him her stuff is already shoved into a free room on the second floor, then gestures right at her things sitting inside, and the main character just shrugs, saying she works just as fast as always. Even with all that hesitation, he still refuses to quit trying to love his girlfriend, and Mercia watches him with a heavy, sad stare before asking, "Can I do it?" He slumps his shoulders, lets out a tired breath, and admits he's ready to move on, saying her help will truly matter. Then the girl flashes a bright smile and, with a joyful voice, asks if it's really true. Isagi tightens his frown and tells her to go straight to her parents because they'll panic, especially Kelsey. Then the memory of that evil village chief screaming he'd never let this happen hits him, and the girl just stands there, totally stunned. She trembles and, with a shaky voice, admits she's got her mother's permission. The guy's baffled and presses her to explain again. And then, just like that, he finally gets it, not far from the main character's place, in a village where the night has already fallen. A blazing-tempered elder storms out and roars his daughter's name with pure fury. He clamps his left fist tight, rage blazing as he storms her way and orders her to come home, yelling. He won't let her stay with Asagi. The guy's mortified, and the girl is completely baffled. The next day, after everything settles, the girl gives the main character's brand new house a gentle knot built with alchemy, and now she's here. He shoots her a worried glance, tells her good morning by name, and asks if she and Kelsey settled everything right yesterday while she stares down, sad as can be. Gripping the hem of her dress, ears drooped, saying nothing. Mercier blurts out that she never got her father's permission, so she'll have to head back home every morning to help him, and the protagonist immediately gets it. The girl begs him for forgiveness in a voice so crushed it hurts, and Asagi instantly thinks of her as his precious daughter because of course he does. Meanwhile, the alchemist flashes back to the village chief, losing it, spitting orders to bring her back while his fist clenched with rage. The young man thinks they can finally talk it out. Then he stares at his downcast girlfriend and tells her it's more than enough. She just needs to come with him. She whips around, eyes brimming with sadness, then rushes up to him and blurts that she'll still convince her father so she can live and work in the same house. With a hand pressed to her chest, she begs him for just a little time, and the shock hits him hard. Isagi tells her she doesn't have to push herself so hard because it'd be heartbreaking if she tried to fight. Then he lifts his hands in a peace offering, and with a shy little gulp, he admits he can't stop imagining how terrified he'd be if they suddenly started sharing a home. Mercia keeps trying to object to him, and the guy scratches his head, totally stumped, then throws his hand back like he doesn't get what she's saying, while a second girl with ears watches from behind the bushes, then blurts Mercia's name. She whips around, eyes wide with shock, ready to hunt down the voice that just called her name, while Isaki crouches behind Mercia, peeking out like, "Wait, who's that?" Surprised just as hard by the stranger. Right in front of them, a young, beautiful girl with adorable ears shows up. She thrusts one hand forward, tucks the other to her chest, and sprints straight at them, grinning like she just got the mercy she's been praying for. Her mouth gapes in pure shock, eyes popping wide as she recognizes her old acquaintance. Mercier hesitates, blurts her name, and calls the girl Naya. She charges up to her and snatches her hands, grinning as she blurts that she heard Mercia came back just to meet her. Mercia beams back, saying they haven't seen each other in ages, while the protagonist stands nearby, watching it all unfold. Naya keeps a grip on Mercier's hands and blurts out why her old friend vanished and came back so suddenly. She's ready to explain everything, but then Naya spots the guy and freezes, staring at him in stunned shock. The girl frowns, gapes in shock, and keeps staring at the young man. Then he shoves his hand forward, totally thrown by her stubborn look, until Nay suddenly snaps to it and blurts out, "Wait, I get it." The girl's cheeks burn as she taps her chin with one finger and flashes a sly slice of a smile, blurting that she brought her husband. Then Mercy's face erupts with embarrassment, and she wildly waves her hands in every direction, trying to shut that rumor down. After a while, they finally spell out the whole situation to Nay, and the protagonist leans in and says, "So yeah, my name's Asagi, and I'm an alchemist." The girl repeats how he plans to use alchemy to make this village thrive, and she just grins and says, "That's awesome." Nay shuts his eyes, grins, and says he feels like a good person. Then the girl walks up, offers her hand for a handshake, and the guy stares at it in shock. The girl with the ears pops up and introduces herself as Naya, then shuts one eye, grins way too wide with a blush creeping in, and proudly says she's Mercy, Naya's childhood friend. The girl grins and yanks the alchemist's hand tight, shaking it hard, side to side like she's announcing a win, while the alchemist just freezes, totally baffled. Mercia watches it all with sharp, displeased eyes. The protagonist stared at his brand new friend with his mouth hanging open, completely stunned by how warmly she welcomed him like he mattered. Naya flashes a confident smirk, presses up against Mercia, then covers her mouth with her hand and asks if she really invited him only for her to crack into deep, blush-fueled embarrassment and admit she did, even while asking what's so wrong with that. He stares at the confused Mercia and the awkward Naya, completely thrown off because he honestly thought he and Mercia had no secrets left between them. But that sudden shift in her face proves they're way more on the same wavelength than he realized. He watches the girl nearby, facing away from him, and suddenly thinks, "Man, I'd love a friend that close." Then Mercier gets slammed with embarrassment from her friend's words. Annie bolts off and tells them she has to go, and the girl turns to Asagi with a wish that his farm thrives. Then she swings her right hand like a final goodbye. Mercier answers back just as warmly, and after Asagi, she too waves her hand at them. Mercia grips the hem of her dress in sheer embarrassment, heat flooding her cheeks as she blurts out an apology and blames her noisy friend. Then the protagonist steps in, shakes his head, and tells her he's actually glad she spoke to them. After a while, the main character tells his girlfriend to start work with him today, and she quickly fixes her hair, stunned that they're starting this early. He leans in and explains he needs to check as soon as possible whether the harvest will roll in here. He props his palm on his chin, staring off like he's replaying yesterday back when he cleared every weed in this field while building his house, and now he's got to plow the whole land. The boy snaps around in shock, staring off to the side, and Isagi blurts that there's a stone right in the way, so the main character decides to use it for material, while the girl just watches in silence. Isagi slaps his palm onto the boulder, studies its composition, and boom! A glowing magic circle snaps around his hand as he reshapes the stone until it starts looking exactly like a human silhouette. Then boom, a massive stone golem stomps into view right in front of the boy and the girl. The main character grins because he actually pulled it off, while Marcia stares at the monster, shock blazing in her eyes. Isagi grips the magic stone in his hands, stares at it like it's a loaded weapon, and imagines driving its power straight into his chest. Then the guy slots it into place. With a grin, the protagonist clenches his fist and shouts that the golem is ready, then its eyes ignite in a blinding flash. Isagi whips around and barks for it to move forward. The golem obeys instantly, stepping out like it's been waiting for the cue. And Mercia stares in stunned disbelief. The protagonist barks orders at the stone golem to plow the earth, cupping his hands to his mouth to blast his voice into its ears. And the golem obeys again, ripping through the soil with the help of two O's. Misaki throws a hand to his forehead to block the sun and finally get a clear look at his invention, then grins. There's nothing wrong with the magical powers flow, and that makes him ecstatic. The girl beside him beams and tells him, of course, like it's exactly what you'd expect from the golem you built. She says she's about to spray herbicide across the whole wide area. Then bam! The village chief's voice booms from behind the bushes, and the man yells the young man's name, demanding what's going on. Mercier's eyes narrow the moment she hears her father's voice. She doesn't even glance back. She's still seething, and the main character stares at the village head, who can't believe his eyes. A golem. Shock hits him so hard he blurts the name on his tongue. Isagi tells him that the golem was forged by alchemy to help out in the field, then reassures him it won't attack anyone, and to just relax. The man folds his arms, stutters, and hesitates, while Kelsey's still not totally convinced, but admits that alchemy really can be useful. The man rubs his chin like he's plotting something, then asks the boy if the land can grow crops, only for the boy to stare back, stunned, while the golem keeps plowing behind them. The protagonist grins and claims the dirt here isn't much different from the Empire's, so he's sure everything will sprout without a hitch, while Isagi stares at the seeds in his hands and shuts it down, saying it's just a guess. The man wrinkles his face, glances off like he can't believe it, and blurts that if it's true, well, goodness, that's just wonderful. Meanwhile, behind him, his daughter starts spraying herbicide all over the plants. He can't stop thinking about Mercia, and when he realizes she doesn't even react to Kelsey, it hits him that she's furious, and he gets embarrassed. Meanwhile, the girl keeps doing her own thing, refusing to look at her father. He yanks a bag from his pack, and the heavy, awkward mood hits him like a wave. Then he declares, "All right, I'm growing plants now," and invites the village chief to come over and see it for himself. The main character grins and says, if everything goes right, we'll be able to harvest straight away, clutching a huge bag in his hands. The Beastman village elder stares at him, baffled. Wait, I don't get what you mean. He keeps whispering to himself that he'll be able to harvest right away. Then he starts wondering, until the guy rips open the bag and says, first, I'm scattering those alchemy-made special fertilizers. The protagonist tells them the raw material is plain fertilizer the Empire already uses, but instead of tweaking it or boosting it, he personally turned it into something far more nutritious. The man stares at him, stunned and completely lost. The girl clocks that her father knows nothing and goes quiet. Then Mercier finally cracks and tells Kelsey straight up, it's a fertilizer made through alchemy, brewed to pump strength back into drained soil, and he can't hide the shock on his face as he says it. The man, baffled, finally says he gets it. And the protagonist exhales in relief, just watching the father and daughter. The girl then rushes to apologize to Isagi for freaking him out, and the guy meets her with a gentle, kind smile. He flashes a smile at her and says he feels like they've got a problem with each other. Then he straight up claims they'll still get along, because family can't be replaced. Mercia glances at her father and answers with a bright yes, fully backing him up, and the man grins right back. The boy snaps his head toward them and yells for everyone to scatter the fertilizer right now. The golem's already done, just standing a short distance away. Beside her father, the girl nods and backs the main character without hesitation. They get to work right away. She dumps the bag's contents on the ground, and the gong beside her starts swinging a hoe like it's got a job to finish. The protagonist tells everyone the golem will churn through the scattered fertilizer with the hoe, then switch to a shovel to carve out proper beds. The boy promises they'll plant seeds in ready, prepared soil. Then the village chief calls out Soggy by name and demands to know if he should wait before he starts mixing the soil with fertilizer. The protagonist shrugs, saying that's how it usually goes. But the fertilizer he made also turbocharges decomposition, so you save time and don't have to mix it to death. And the guy is absolutely stunned. The girl shuts her eyes and, with zero worry on her face, tells Mr. Asagi it's basically a walk in the park. The man behind her forces a shaky smile, while Asagi digs through his backpack and realizes the bar has just been raised. He yanks a bag out of his backpack and tells you, first, we plant stuff that'll survive the wasteland, easy to grow, close to everyone. Then he opens it and boom, inside are carefully bred potatoes. He bends over the beds he made, scatters the potatoes into the holes with care, then says he drops in seed potatoes and shoves soil over them with a hoe. Then the boy grabs a bucket of water and, with rock-solid competence, tells them that if they soak those spots, it'll sprout and be ready for harvest, so Asagi snaps his move and dumps the water straight into the holes, and the girl right behind him does the same. The man dug his heels in, his voice shaky as he snapped back at the boy, insisting he can't grow up overnight. Then the boys stared at the village chief like, wait, what? He says potatoes grow fast, sure, but they still take 3 or 4 months. Then bam, sprouts start punching through the ground right under his feet, popping up from the holes. He whips his head down in shock, and there it is. His potato plant shooting up at an insane pace. In just a moment, the ripe potatoes pop up all across the field. So suddenly the man jerks back, eyes bulging and mouth hanging open in shock, while the girl beside him just grins, watching their work unfold. Those potatoes are already fully ripe and begging to be harvested, so the protagonist cradles an empty bucket in his hands, grins at the picture, and practically rejoices, while the guy standing behind him freezes in shock, unable to snap back to reality. The guy turns to him and says, "Those stems and leaves are yellow now, time to harvest." And Kelsey stares back in total shock, completely blown away by what he just said. The protagonist clamps onto one bush and hauls it up with all his might then. He frowns and asks, how? While Mercia and her father stare at the guy with bated breath, praying he'll pull the bush up. Finally, the main character nails it then. Pushing even harder, he rips the bush straight out of the ground, potato and all. Isagi's face lights up with pure delight as he stares at the results. He blurts out, brimming with joy, that it worked total success. With one hand gripping a vegetable, the other planted by his side, he admits he had faith. But still, that relief hits hard. Mercia can't help smiling either, and she heaps on the congratulations. The man grips another plucked potato plant and roars, "I can't believe you can harvest potatoes this same day." Then the other guy stares right back at him. He insists his surprise makes perfect sense and tells her to try it. Then the girl jumps in and says, "Let's just do a quick sauté." And Asagi grins, since the weather's nice, they'll cook it right outside. After a bit, they threw open the table and got to work. The girl grabbed a knife, peeled the potatoes, and chopped them up. The man and the guy behind her slid into their seats, and the second one reached into his backpack again, pulling out whatever came next. The village chief quizzes Izzy, eyeing a weird contraption etched with a magic circle, and the guy blurts that it's a fire-spitting magic device. Then Kelsey gasps and repeats it word for word. He slaps his hand onto the round switch on the side of the device and flips it, then, bam! A tiny light blooms across the magic circle, and he grins as he tells you, "Press the button like this, and the fire will ignite." He stares in jaw-dropping wonder, mouth hanging open as fire erupts out of nowhere, and then he just stays cool, saying that once you move the lever, you can crank the fire's power to whatever you want. A man stares with wide eyes and clenched brows, swearing he's heard the city is full of handy stuff, but a thing that can start a fire that easily? No way. He throws his arms out, then gapes at the device sitting on the table. The protagonist stares at his jaw-dropping surprise with a calm face. Then the village elder quizzes the young man about whether he did it himself and says, "Isagi," straight to his face, while the fire keeps roaring on. With a grin plastered on his face, the boy half closes his eyes and tells the village chief, this isn't just luck, it's alchemy at work, shaving utensils that feel straight from magic. And the chief just stares at him, stunned. The girl tosses potatoes into a frying pan, cranks up the heat, then leans in and decides the next move, she'll pour in vegetable oil and let them sizzle on medium heat until they're perfect. She's waiting for that crust to go golden, then she'll flip it again. Right as Mercia grins, tosses the potatoes up a couple times, and grips the pan's handle like she's flying them straight to perfection. Kelsey slaps a lid over the frying pan, and right beside her dad and the protagonist can't stand it anymore. They're just staring, starving for the food. Kelsey grips the cutlery in her hands while Asagi holds a blank plate, ready for the first bite. The girl shuts her eyes and grins at them like she just won something big, and Mercia lets it simmer on low heat for around 4 minutes before spreading out the portions. The girl grips a tray of ready food, being bright and laughing as she tells them it's all done, because she's already finished the potato sauté and the set table has been filled with it. His mouth starts to water the moment he stares at the dish, and a tiny tear slips out as he thinks his daughter made it thin. The girl shrugs, saying the seasonings are just oil, salt, and pepper, and leaves it up to them. The guide skewers a chunk of potato and pops it in his mouth, chewing it slow and thorough. Then his eyes snap wide with shock, and the girl picks the dish too, blushing as she watches. With a grin plastered on his face, the main character declares it's delicious. Then the man keeps chewing the sauté potato like there's no tomorrow, while the girl across from him chimes in that there's nothing left to question about the taste. The village chief stares at the finished dish, stunned. Then the moment he tastes those potatoes, his eyes widen and he declares they're way better than anything their own village can grow. The man says it's weird, but he feels like pure energy is exploding out of him. Then he pumps his left fist like he's hyped. The other guy stares in total confusion, thinking the beastman's senses are turned way up. The calm-faced protagonist grins and swears this isn't just any potato. It's been upgraded, and one bite boosts your vitality, and the guy is absolutely stunned it can actually work. Asaki admits that even when he says it, it barely hits. Then the man keeps shoveling down that mouth-watering dish until his plate is finally wiped clean, and Mercy swoops in to haul away the dirty dishes, leaving the man and the boy standing outside. Kelsey rubs her chin, looks the guy dead in the eye, and asks if anything can actually grow in a village like this. Then she learns that if they plant the plants he's perfected through alchemy, he promises it'll work. With a burning, inspired smile and a voice full of confidence, the main character slapped a hand to his chest and declared, "I'll do it, no matter what, because that's my job." And the other man stared at him in shock, then said nothing. Isagi says he'll keep everything running by expanding his fields even more, then growing fresh improved plant varieties so he can harvest all kinds of crops. Kelsey smiles softly, convinced his power will turn these lands fertile, and the man roars in agreement, slapping one hand to his side as he declares, "I trust this to you." With raw sincerity in his voice, he blurts out a loud thank you, then promises he'll get it done bit by bit. Then, the very next day, he sprints into action, sowing fresh fields and planting tomatoes and carrots. Plants crowd every corner of his house, and the fields keep multiplying like crazy. A boy and a girl stand shoulder to shoulder beside a gallum, and Asagi, blushing hard, admits it's kind of awkward, asking Mercia if she totally overdid it. Mercia doesn't dodge the question. She just smiles and says yes. The protagonist dragged his hand to his forehead to block the blazing sun and stared out at the far horizon, remembering how back in the palace he used to grow plants across an entire sprawling expanse. Knowing he had all that space, Asagi got way too hyped and overdid it now. Dead tired, he yanks out another potato bush, pants hard as he tries to catch his breath, while Mercia and the golem behind him pitch in to help. The protagonist rubs under the pole with his right hand, exhales a heavy sigh, and asks himself what he's supposed to do with all this, then shrugs, because he could just stash it all in a magic bag. The girl strides up with a confused look, clutching a huge sack of harvest, and Asagi snaps that they're short on hands. There's no way they'll even scrape together half of it before the season ends. Mercia leans in and asks if he can forge another golem, but the young man only smiles shyly and admits bashfully that he can't anymore, because the truth is brutal, he's out of magic stones. Suddenly, the young girl slaps a hand to her chest and cheerfully urges them to ask her mom and dad for help. Mercia's totally sure they'll jump in and save the day. The protagonist is told to wait just a bit, and the girl nods like it's settled, then says they'll work with the gallum for now. He sinks back, one hand planted at his side, reaching up with the other, and grimaces as he groans about his aching lower back. Suddenly, a girl's voice rings out from nowhere, sounding confused as she blurts a question. Then the guy snaps his head toward it and spots Naya standing right there. He squints at her in disbelief, then forces out a cheerful, "Good morning." Like he didn't just get caught off guard. She snaps her eyes wide open, throws both hands over her mouth, and blurts out that their village has never ever seen a field this huge. The protagonist yanks his hat off, looks you straight in the eye, and says, "Yesterday, we cultivated it, thanks to alchemy." The girl gasps in shock and blurts out that only 2 days have gone by since he arrived. Then she can't believe her eyes as she insists it's downright impossible for anything to even grow in this soil, and even more impossible that harvest time is already here. The main character grins and credits it all to alchemy. Then the girl snaps, shuts her eyes tight, and her rage simmers as she yells that he's got just one answer for everything. Suddenly, A voice snaps from the side claiming, Asaji is telling the truth and calling the girl by name, so the boy whips around, stunned, and nearly freezes when he realizes the newcomer is Uncle Kelsey. With a hoe resting on his shoulder, the man boasts that he saw it with his own eyes just yesterday, right beside him. Soggy modified crops still grow in this village, and there stands his smiling wife, holding a basket, while his daughter watches. A delighted spark flares in Nea's eyes, and the blush creeps up her cheeks. She clenches her fists, grins with pure admiration, and says, if Uncle says it, then it's gotta be true. Nea thinks it's awesome. She whips around to the main character, grinning the same way, and fires off that excited assumption like, so we're harvesting now, right? She winced at her own over-the-top reaction, then steadied herself, nodded along, and wearing that shy little smile admitted he'd gone a bit too hard on the sowing. The man's blown away by how much everything's changed. He never expected the field to explode with growth in a single day. The Soggy scratches his head, flings his hand back, and rushes out a genuine apology, admitting he went way too far in his excitement. Kelsey blurts out that it's amazing their starving village is suddenly drowning in fresh crops, and the village elders chuckle, telling him to stop worrying. His wife grins at the guy and says, for the first time, their village has an unbelievable harvest, so much she can't help but sound excited. Naya, right beside her, adds that she'll join in too. And the guy looks at his brand new friends, joy lighting up his face. They practically push him to kick off the harvesting. Meanwhile, Mercy and her mom grin as they pick pumpkins and squashes. Kelsey slices a cabbage with a sharp knife, and the stone golem along with the worn-out protagonist plucks the beets despite every ounce of fatigue. After a while, a whole pile of baskets, jam-packed with different veggies and fruits, even eggplants, and mother-in-law sit shoulder to shoulder, and you wipe her soggy forehead with a tired exhale. Nia bursts out of the bushes calling his name, tomato in her left hand, index finger pointing like she's got a challenge. Then she grins and asks if he wants to give it a try. She shoots back the same smile and says, I'll definitely give it my best shot. And the moment the words hit, the girl practically explodes with joy, cheering at full volume. The girl with those cute ears takes the tomato straight to her mouth like it's the best thing ever, sinks her teeth into it with pure, jaw-dropping pleasure, blushes, then shyly pats her cheek while squinting hard from how insanely good that bite tastes. The girl with that bubbly, enthusiastic voice leans in and asks what it is, then practically declares it insanely tasty, and the main character can't help but grin at her reaction, because Nea chimes in that it's nothing like the tomatoes she's ever known. Isaji leans in and tells her these tomatoes don't just grow faster, they pump up the sugar too, and the girl gasps in pure awe, grinning like, that's so cool. While they admire it, Mercia creeps out from behind the bushes with a disgusted scowl, glaring at them. The girl drags out a gloomy little sigh and says, you two look like you're having the best time together. Then you, holding a tomato in one hand, stare at her, and the guy, still biting into his tomato, gapes at her in shock. Mercy grabs another tomato, dead calm, and swears she'll try it too. Then the protagonist just nods along, no hesitation, and the girl chomps right into the veggie with a grin. Suddenly, Nia slides up beside her and props her side up, making the girl slap a hand over her mouth in shock, stunned that Nea just started acting nice out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Mercier tightens her brows and stares at her, completely baffled. Niall flashes a sly smile, and Mercy's face blows up red, like it's about to smoke. She glares at her friend's words, and spits Niall's name out through pure rage. The girl screams at her to stop, then darts forward and catches up with Naya just as she bolts away yelling that she's furious, while Isaji, watching from the side, picks up a tomato with this tiny smile and thinks, honestly, these two get along. 3 days later, Isaji, the village chief, and even the chief's wife are all out in a field just a short walk from Isaji's home, and the whole crew stands there like they've earned it. Isaji breaks the news that the harvest is finally done, and he's genuinely, wholeheartedly grateful for everything they did. Kelsey leans in and asks the boy what he'll do with the harvest, and he grips his bag tight, grinning as he says he's giving it straight to the villagers, because if he keeps it sitting in that magic bag, it'll clog up. Mercia's mother lifts her left index finger and proposes a banquet. Then the protagonist stares at her, shocked, and asks her again about it. With that huge grin, she says it'd be perfect to spoil everyone with dishes made from the harvest we pulled from your fields, and she's sure that if everyone gets to taste it, they'll finally know you for real, and living together will feel so much easier. Isagi hesitates, grimacing at the idea of some exhausting banquet prepped. Bus. All of it. Then he rubs his chin and flashes back to the palace banquets. Mercy calls out to him by name. She tells him, Yeah, they call it a banquet, but it's totally chill. Just gather folks at the central square, throw up a few tables, and set out chairs. Then the guy nods like, I get it. The village chief blasts out that he'll round everyone up and get everything ready, and then he declares a banquet tonight. The protagonist jumps at the idea right away, only to snap to attention when he realizes the feast is happening tonight. After a bit, the guy leans in and asks if the girl's ready, then barks that they've got to rush to the central square. Now he can't stop worrying if it'll all go smoothly, but Mercia doesn't get what he's freaking out about. Asagi blurts that he's human and that he's only just landed here. Then the guy panics, hesitates, and nervously asks if anyone will actually show up for his banquet. The girl says the banquet's for today, yet she's sure everyone will show up. Then the protagonist whips his gaze to the square, stunned. Marcia whips around to him and declares, everyone's coming because it's been ages since we've had banquets like this. Asagi can't believe his eyes as the girl turns and boom, this huge crowd pours in behind her. Even tiny kids are running around in the streets, and he just stares in shock, then flashes a grin like, no way. Marcia is beaming too. Suddenly, Mercy's mom's voice cuts in from outside calling out to that Sagi by name and insisting she's itching to start cooking, so he better help by bringing the ingredients. The guy nods and agrees right away. He empties his magic bag onto the table like a thunderclap: eggplants, tomatoes, onions, pumpkins, and carrots. And the woman can't believe her eyes at how many he's pulled out. The village chief's wife bursts out that it's been forever since they've had ingredients this fresh, then asks what on earth they'll cook while the protagonist grins and soaks up the whole cheerful crowd. All the beast folk were rushing around, prepping for the festival, each one locked in on their own task, while Mercia, Nea, and the others chopped and gathered ingredients for the big dish. Once every ingredient was lined up and tossed straight into the cauldron, Asagi started pouring his alchemy power into the food. Every soul in Pomania huddled and whispered with shaking nerves. Then, right on cue, the fire roared to life, and the cauldron's food started bubbling and cooking. As the food simmered in the cauldron, the beast race girls hovered over it, tossing in ingredients little by little until it all came together. Asagi just watched with a grin, way too curious about the whole cooking process. After a while, every single dish came out perfect, and as the villagers rushed up to the table for their food, Kelsey Mercy's father called out to Asagi. Right as the village chief stood front and center on the main stage, the man yanked the boy onto the stage and told him to come over for a minute. Asagi nodded and agreed to the village chief's request. Kelsey stepped forward and thanked the villagers for showing up, then told them straight this feast was theirs because a powerful saga had forced them to share an abundance of food with their food-starved village. The second Asagi heard the man speak, her face flared red with embarrassment. She was stunned, because she never expected he'd suddenly lay out her introduction to the whole village like that. Asagi stood on the stage, frozen by the sudden spotlight, but after a heartbeat, he finally stepped up and delivered a warm, welcoming speech. After he finally steadied himself, Asagi introduced himself to them with a voice that shook like it couldn't hold its own, then blurted out that he was an alchemist, confessed he'd only stumbled into their village a few days ago and didn't know much yet, and even though he sounded timid and nervous, the villagers greeted him with warm, friendly smiles. Then the boy lit up and said, "Don't worry, there are still tons of ingredients left," and told everyone the villagers could grab as much as they wanted, and Naya and Marcia just beamed while Asagi put on a performance on stage. The village chief, after that surprise intro from the boy, demanded everyone welcome the new resident Izagi and raise a drink for him, then lifted a wooden mug in his hands to prove it. Every villager shot their wooden mugs up in celebration, grinning like they'd won the world. And when they introduced him as their newest villager, they erupted with a loud roar. Then down went the drinks in one happy go, bottom to bottom. As the festival blared on, Polminia's village streets were buzzing like crazy. Families packed the festive tables, laughing and smiling, because the mountain of delicious food in front of them was something they hadn't tasted in ages. Striding through the street, he spotted festive tables packed to the brim, no empty seats in sight, while every resident dug into mouth-watering food and the whole village erupted with lively noise. Suddenly, from far away, that guy got called out because Mercy Issue was already parked at the festive table. The girl leaned toward Asagi and pointed out, "Hey, there's a free seat right next to me. Annie's got you." When the boy slid up to their table, the girl told him she'd already scooped out his food, and Asagi, hearing that, turned to Mercia and thanked her right away. Right there on his plate sat pato, fu beef, and vegetal goodness, dressed up with veggies, a thick, rich soup. The moment he saw it, he scooped a spoonful of patafu into his bowl, and Asagi stared at it like it was pure gold. Mercia blushed at his flattered reaction. Nea grinned at the way the kid admired it, And then Isagi took a bite of patafu with veggies, savoring every delicious taste. After one bite, he stared at his now empty spoon with pure glee. Patofo with veggies was just that good, with sweet carrots and onions locking in perfect harmony with a punch of black pepper. The meal, delicious. He didn't even have words for it. Isagi even got to savor that mouth-watering mixed potatoes, mushrooms, sausages, and a whole pile of other flavors, while Messiah leaned in with a grin as the kid dug into the patty with veggies. And right then, Nea took his own bite too. Niha took one bite of the veggie asterisk patofo and lit up. She couldn't stop praising it, saying she hadn't tasted a soup that rich in ages, and that's exactly why she fully savored every spoonful. Turns out they kept pinching their pennies on scraps, so they'd even chew through veggie peelings most days. Nia just nodded along quietly with Mercia's words, secretly relieved there was still plenty on the table. And right then, a beast race man overheard everything. With a hollow, sad face, he muttered that this banquet wouldn't last forever, and soon they'd be dragged back to their pathetic meals again. The villagers who heard him went speechless, stunned by how cruel those words sounded. In the middle of the banquet, they refused to even hear those assumptions, especially with food about to run scarce again. But that villager was convinced it was real, and Isagi just stared on, hit with awkward shock. He finally got it. There was nothing anyone could do about the way some people's minds worked, so he couldn't blame that man for worrying, even though the other residents still managed to make him feel pretty small. Right then, every house in the village was still stuck with the same starving food supply. Nothing improved at all. And that prickly news crushed the guy's mood, wiping the smile off his face. Then the boy made his choice, and he shouted at the top of his lungs, pulling every villager's eyes to him, trying to calm their panic as Isagi rose from his seat. The boy suddenly blared out in front of Pumina's villagers that if they tried, they could grow the crops he painstakingly bred then. Every mouth went silent as the whole crowd froze and leaned in to hear him. Then the guy told them, straight up, that crops could still grow strong even in their drained soil. And because they could shrug off the cold and viruses, the panicked residents just stared, stunned, as they were hit with his soaked, still sincere pep talk. Then the silver-haired boy stepped forward and swore to every villager that he'd hand out the seeds of those crops to them all. While Sagi stared back with that same confident smirk, Naya's eyes widened at the boy's words, and the brown-haired girl couldn't believe it. She even managed to grow plants herself. Isagi didn't back out. He nodded and agreed with the girl. If Naya took good care of those seeds, they'd grow into healthy plants bursting with tasty fruit. The girl lit up with joy, and as soon as the guy spoke, the villagers erupted into whispering. The man who heard his words went utterly still, pure shock, crashing through him. He blurted out in pure disbelief that he felt like he was dreaming, while the man froze in shock when the boy offered to help boost the food supply of their village, Palminia. Still, this villager couldn't shake the worry. Isagi had only just shown up in their village. The man couldn't make sense of why he was doing so much for the villagers, so he grabbed his courage and went straight to Isagi to ask himself. Mercia started to panic over Isagi because that man had hurled those offensive words at him, while the villagers couldn't even wrap their heads around why some random kid like Isagi would do all this for them. But the boy stayed ice calm after the rude question, showing nothing else. Rage didn't spill out in words his clenched fist said it all. Then he launched into his explanation. With every soggy, broken-up detail, his story hit the man. As a baby, he'd been tossed out in front of a church in the imperial capital, an orphan with nothing. And when the villager heard it, shock slammed straight into his face. Isagi kept spilling his life story, fighting for scraps of food like they were treasure. Hunger gnawed at him every day, and the people of Prumenia couldn't believe what they were hearing, stunned by his heartbreak. And at the end, Isagi told them straight up why he understands what it feels like to live on empty, because he's been hungry, with barely any good food to eat every single day. That's why the boy grinned and asked them, like he couldn't imagine anyone saying no to food that tastes that good. Even after he poured out his heartbreaking childhood still, he wasn't really sad about it. He was stunned not just by the boy's heartbreaking story, but by how he kept grinning at the world like nothing could break him. Then he stared at Isagi with eyes so wide they looked like they might pop. He awkwardly apologized to his drenched companion for doubting him, but the boy just shrugged it off, because if he'd been a villager, he'd question him too. Mercy shot a grin at the blonde. Then the determined villager leaned in and asked Isagi straight up could he spare some seeds. If Isagai's dinner table was packed, the man wanted in too, begged for a few and promised he'd grow his own food. Then a man shot his palm up in the air, and right behind him the whole crowd of villagers started lifting their hands too, because after his request, More and more people pushed toward Isagi, desperate to grab the seeds and finally take a shot at farming. Isagi got swamped by the crowd surging for the seeds, and he steadied the panic-struck Parmenian villagers in front of everyone, cracking the news that he had more than enough seeds for all of them. Mercio just watched it all with a warm, satisfied smile. No matter how tough you are or how brilliant you look, eat like trash and your heart turns cold. Then you start forgetting what your life is even for. That's why, even after becoming an alchemist, Isagi kept digging, researching food like it was the real cure. The boy handed out the plant seeds he'd been perfecting, and the villagers surged into one giant line for each bag, because he knew hunger didn't care who you were, and he did all of this so more people could stand up against it. In that case, Isagi wanted to ramp up farming across this world, and the boy stared at the joyful villagers who had just gotten the bag of seeds with a confident grin. Between them, he spotted a familiar man clutching a massive bag of seeds like it was his next big move. Isagi knew that if the villagers started farming sooner, Pomenia's food crisis would finally ease up while Kelsey was out there hustling, handing out seeds to his people. Then the man clutching a bag of seeds roared out to every villager in Pomenia again, and the whole town snapped their attention to him. The man knew all of this was meant to make the village thrive, so he pumped his villagers up with one simple promise of a brighter future. Then everyone lifted their mugs and cheered. Night dropped fast, and the outside world turned pitch dark, with only glowing lanterns lighting up Pomenia. So the villagers cheered, raised their cups, and drank every last drop, buzzing with hope for a better life. Meanwhile, inside the Ramirez Imperial Castle, the head alchemist hunched over a report about the booming output of magic tools and items, sending it straight to a superior, and then that superior snapped. Garius. Turns out the boy wasn't a boy at all, he was a prince. And he pulled off the boldest lie to the throne. Turfincha Remoris. The Roan Drenskrial, this month easy reploid any saggy this month. The crown prince just needed answers his aunt is on 12. Garius, the chief alchemist, stared in shock, because his master, Weiss, had actually remembered that rude commoner. And when the prince asked, the man just froze, leaving an awkward silence to hang in the room. Then he leaned in and told Prince Weiss, "I just fired the commoner." The man had assumed he was nothing but a dependent, and for a breath the whole room froze in silence. Prince Weiss was blown away and demanded to know why Isagi had been sent packing. Then the man smugly bragged to the prince that, in this empire, an alchemist's job was to forge magical tools and gear for the military, and Isagi did none of it, barely scraping by with the bare minimum. After spelling out why Isagi got tossed, Crown Prince Weiss Remoris snapped raged, and then hurled a long-haired man straight into the fool category, slamming his fist onto the table so hard everyone in the office heard it, because what that guy did was unforgivable. Garius was totally stunned to see the prince flying off the handle, just because he fired that insolent commoner, Isagi. The guy was in shock, because he never once thought that alchemist was anything special. Prince Weiss snapped at Garius, furious that the Empire's food crisis was still crushing them despite the crops Isagi had worked so hard to develop. So he handed the responsibility to Isagi and pumped the budget even higher. Even with the prince fuming, Gary still blurted in a shaking voice that Isagi was useless and he couldn't even wrap his head around it. How could that low-status guy's research be worth more than the magical weapons they've been building? But the furious roar of Crown Prince Weiss snapped him out of it. Prince Weiss Ramirez practically shouted at the chief alchemists, demanding what he even saw in his subordinates besides pure status, because in Wise's eyes, Garius was totally talentless. The gray-haired man started shaking all over the moment he understood how bad this was, while the Crown Prince kept glaring at the chief of all alchemists with icy fury. Garius's pale face was drenched in cold sweat, and the alchemist's chief froze, because the Crown Prince's wrath had just landed on his head, and he had no idea what to do next. Prince Weiss wore a grim scowl and snapped in a furious voice, demanding the white-haired man come up with an immediate way to boost food production. Then the Crown Prince suddenly froze mid-sentence, pausing like something hit him. Garius trembled with icy fear, staring down the Crown Prince's terrifying rage, and waited for his master to drop the next words, another way to crush this problem. With that tiny pause, Prince Barris shut the alchemist's chief up with pure intimidation. Then he slammed down a new ultimatum. Garius had to bring Isagi right back, because Isagi was tied up doing agricultural work in the meantime. Daylight spilled out, and that gray-haired grandmother gripped her hoe and thanked Isagi because it was all his doing. She never believed anything could sprout from that rough, nasty soil. But now the whole neighborhood was grinning because the crop finally grew. Mercia and Isagi practically beamed when their grandmother praised them for helping their crops grow. And right there, smiling in sync, they told her the truth. The only thing that mattered was her happiness. Then the girl and the boy tore themselves away from their gray-haired grandmother, and with the seeds from selectively bred crops they handed out across Pomania, the villagers made sure it all came together. In Pomania village, the whole place buzzed with non-stop farming fever. Everyone got to work planting the seeds the boy delivered, digging in the fields day after day to grow their plants and fruits. The Beast Race girl said if the peace held steady, Pomania would rake in a massive harvest. Isagi nodded, but then he froze, because something just didn't add up. Isagi was freaking out over something, and it made him go quiet and deep in thought. Then Mercia saw that worried look and instantly panicked too, demanding to know what had him so confused. Then the guy leaned in and told her straight up that the fertilizer they were using was brewed by Asagi herself by upgrading the imperial fertilizer. He added that if they kept going like this, they'd burn through it in just a few years. Mercia stared at him, completely stunned. Isagi kept talking. He told her that this was exactly why they needed fresh fertilizer, one they could produce right here in this village, and the girl just stared at him, stunned. Isaki fell into deep thought. While they could grab imperial fertilizer from traveling merchants, it still made more sense to craft fertilizer from the village's raw materials because buying it from those merchants would drain them with a brutal price. She realized that if she kept pulling fertilizer from Asagi's pocket, the problem would never truly vanish. After the black-haired girl's words hit Asagi, he immediately chose his first move: go gather the fertilizers that have been sitting in Pomania for ages. And he wasted no time. He boldly told Mercia his plan. Mercy listened to the boy's final decision. She swore she'd ask the peasant family whether, in Pomania village, they knew anything about the fertilizer. Then she'd get her friends to share whatever they found with her. Soon the boy and girl were back in their house, staring at the table where only 3 kinds of village fertilizer sat waiting, and Asagi snapped that it wasn't nearly enough. "It's tiny for a reason," he said. "Because the soil back there was so brutal that hardly anyone even farmed." But that was all it took to lay the groundwork for the new Asagi fertilizer, and to level it up, you'd need raw materials packed with a little extra magical power from right here in the village. Mercia smiled at him and said, "If you want the village's magical raw materials, then head straight for the forest." And Isagi couldn't help but blink, because he wasn't expecting that from her. Mercy leaned in and told him the forest was where they could definitely grab the rare natural materials they needed, only found there. Then she jabbed at the window, and suddenly, a wild stretch of trees unfolded before their eyes. Asagi stared, realizing the raw stuff they were hunting for was right in that forest. So Usagi strode in with a confident grin, because that guy was already itching to hit the forest solo for the village's raw materials, until his next words just vanished mid-sentence. Then, out of nowhere, she told him she'd go with him to the forest, and he just froze, completely stunned by what she said. The girl told him she'd been coming to this forest for ages and promised she'd stay right beside him as his guide, so their work would go off without a hitch. But the CEO couldn't shake the fear that this place was too dangerous for her. Mercy told the boy to hold it together, trying to shake the fear out of his chest. Then she gripped her mop with white knuckles. Mercy said it cool as ice she was just a servant, period, and the girl stood there grinning while clutching her mop like it was a blade. But Asaki just stared at the black-haired girl, totally confused. He couldn't wrap his head around how being a maid had anything to do with her safety, until he learned the truth. Maids had to pack real fighting power to protect their master. Asagi blinked at her claim that maids need real combat power to work, then awkwardly swallowed the truth. Mercia actually had combat skills. After a while, the girl and the boy were already deep in the forest. Asagi stared in shock at how breathtaking it was, while the girl just shrugged like she'd been here 100 times. They pushed forward, and the boy couldn't help but stare drunk on wonder at the wild forest life surrounding Pomania. Mercia led the charge ahead of him, acting like a no-nonsense guide who knew the route by heart. Isagi stared at the forest and realized the plants felt different, like the Beast Kingdom's territory had reshaped them, so he turned to the black-haired girl and demanded answers. Then Mercy calmly told him the truth, that in nature, survival is a ruthless fight, and that meant this kind of struggle was just normal for them. As the girl kept explaining why the Beast Kingdom's fauna looked so different from the Empire, Isagi's eyes snapped to a nearby bush, because they were close and the guy couldn't resist it. Turns out that bush was loaded with star-shaped tree fruits, and the guy couldn't resist. He leaned in, itching to touch one. Mercea's words froze him in place. She warned that if he even touched this plant's fruit, acid would blast out of it. Asagi yanked his hand back from the tree, and fear hit him hard. The boy flushed with embarrassment. He should have studied the plants first instead of reaching for them right away, but Mercia just nodded, reminding him that the forest can hide deadly plants, like this one. Alchemists could dissect any matter with their power, so he frowned for a beat, then snapped his eyes wide and blasted a full examination on a bush loaded with tree fruits. They called this plant carambola carambola, wild forest grower in the southern realm of the animal kingdom. Squeeze its fruit and it instantly blasts out the acid it's been hiding. Get that acid on your skin, and you'd better rinse with water right away and start treatment on the spot. She stared at the plant, trying to figure out the quickest way to get to it. And Asaji's eyes lit up, wanting to grab the carambola's woody fruits because he swore they'd be perfect raw material for making strong acid and for wiping out weeds. Mercia jumped in to help the guy gather the fruits. She wrapped a thick cloth around them so the tree's acid wouldn't leak out, because that poison only splashes when it's touched. The girl clutched the tree fruit in a thick towel, and Asaji sliced it clean off the carambola plant with tiny scissors. Right after that, the guy got to work, prying the tree fruits open and tapping each caramel-like ball with a needle to drain out their acid into a test tube, stuffing it all into his magic bag while Mercier pitched in and helped him every step of the way. Asagi wiped the sweat off his forehead with the back of his hand, looking wiped out. Then he said it out loud. For him, training practice wasn't a chore at all. It was genuinely fun and crazy interesting. Mercia heard him out and grilled Asagi about gathering inside the Empire, because from what he said, she got the sinking feeling they definitely weren't going to let that fly. The boy nodded at the girl's guess, and she was right. Plain and simple. He'd always been told it was safer to hand the task of gathering supplies to knights or adventurers, even though he'd handled the materials himself. The guy kept yabbing, then, out of nowhere, he froze mid-sentence. Then the girl suddenly shrieked and yelled for her master. Isagi's face went paper white and horror-struck as he froze and stared off to the side, scared out of his mind. Then, right in front of them, a nightmare monster erupted out of nowhere, looking like a beastly boar but absolutely colossal, far bigger than any ordinary one. The girl and the guy immediately tried to slip away without making a sound. They stared, exhausted, at the massive boar that had just burst into their space. Then Asagi leaned in and whispered to the girl, "This monster." Then Mercy leaned in and warned him. This giant boar was no beast at all, it was a demon, and its violent temper meant it could snap into action fast, ripping into anyone with those razor-sharp, massive fangs. Suddenly, the demonic monster exploded into a furious sprint straight at them, jaw gaping wide and saliva sprayed sideways as its massive fangs bared for the kill. Isagi felt his nerves scream as the moment's weight crushed down on him, and the pale boy shook with pure terror at what they'd have to do just to dodge that demonic monster and avoid getting torn apart. Out of nowhere, a girl's calm voice called his name, snapping him back to reality. Then, the tennis soggy guy swung his gaze straight onto her. Then she told him to step back and leave it to her, because she planned to take down that monster herself. Mercy even boldly shoved herself in front of Asagi, and the second she did, Asagi froze, terrified and stunned, desperate to stop her. Meanwhile, a massive beastly boar came charging at them at full speed, and that demonic monster was itching to tear into the boy and the girl. The colossal boar thundered toward the girl at full speed, and Mercy braced herself like she'd been waiting for this monster, while Asagi stood nearby, eyes locked on her, tense as a drawn bow. Right as the demonic monster lunged for the black-haired girl, she vanished from his sight in an instant, so his sharp fangs never landed. The demonic monster snapped in shock at her sudden vanishing act, whipping its head left and right to hunt down its lost prey, while Asagi just stared at the demonic boar, exhausted but still standing close. Suddenly he looked up, and the demonic monster froze as its boar-bright eyes snapped wide, because a girl's shadow cut across his face from right above him. Turns out the girl was standing right on top of that demonic monster, so Mercy sprang up with one leap and blasted through the air with a flying summer strike. The huge boar clocked it instantly and lunged forward, desperate to shove its way out of the black-haired girl's hit. Mercia flipped through the air again and again, snatched the distance in seconds, and closed in on the demon monster as it fled. Then she clenched her fist, ready to smash the beastly boar. Then the girl charged straight at the demonic monster, lifted her fist, and swung at the stunned beastly boar. She had to end this fast, because Asagi's safety was the only thing she cared about. She closed in on the demonic monster's body and drove a punch straight into its snout before the boar could even twist away. It was stuck, taking the full hit head-on. Her strike was so brutal the demonic boar blasted through the air for several meters and smashed straight into a tree. Asagi just barely lunged out of the way, so the beast's impact wouldn't take him out. After she smashed the monster with her fist, she stood there, stone calm, watching it get hurled away, demonic boar and all snapping through the air for a few meters, because the threat was gone and Isagi's safety was finally safe. Asagi stared in pure shock as Mercy smashed that massive demonic monster in a single blow. then gawked at the boar getting wiped out by the black-haired girl like it was nothing. Then Mercy leaned in and told him she wouldn't let her master, Isagi, get pulled into pointless trouble like this before she calmly brushed the dust off her maid outfit after the beast-like boar battle. Isagi already knew the beast race had raw power beyond most people. But Mercy's combat strength was on a whole other level. For a split second, doubt hit him. Was she really just a simple servant? So he pressed her for the truth. Marcia heard his question and snapped back that, yeah, she really was a servant. For a beat, the girl went quiet, weighing every word. Mercier kept answering Isagi's question, telling him that as a beast race girl, she could only work in the Imperial Castle because her combat power was the real deal. So yeah, Mercia had a bunch of night jobs, and the girl was totally on board. She could see in the dark, and that maid, look, let her fool people fast, until bandits sometimes came swinging for her. The boy met the black-haired girl's eyes with a warm smile, and he couldn't help thinking that in this empire where beast race people were treated like they didn't matter, asking them for even more was just how things worked. Suddenly, the girl remembered the pressure she'd been getting at work lately, constant push to take on a dark job. So when she quit at the same time Isagi, Mercio finally felt a wave of relief hit him, but the guy was still totally stunned by what he'd just learned about the dark work. Isagi told Mercia, "Because of you and the other guards, guys like me can live safe in this castle." Hearing him talk, the girl snapped her eyes to the guy in pure shock, totally reeling from what he just said. And Isagi wouldn't stop talking. He kept thanking his companion for everything he's done for him. And everything he still does. And the guy only looked at Mercia with that grateful smile like he could never repay her. She stared at his grateful speech, stunned, then froze for her breath, totally speechless. With a red, embarrassed blush, Mercia stammered that the night guard doubled as the servant's job. So yeah, of course, and she quickly tried to brush it off like it was no big deal at all. Mercy's cheeks flared as she snapped her gaze away, mortified, just not at the guy. But her real mood spilled out fast. Her black animal tail whipped and wagged like crazy. And Isagi? He couldn't shake the feeling, but the chores she sometimes took on were straight-up night work. Then the guy switched topics on the fly because he spotted something. And Isagi instantly remembered. These demonic monsters hide a magic stone in their bodies. Mercy had only just heard about it and knew absolutely nothing about where it was or what it did. Then Isagi leaned in and told her the truth. Every bit of magical power that monster drinks from the atmosphere and its prey gets locked inside its magic stone. An alchemist used those stones to forge all kinds of items. After that, he strode straight up to Boar's body. Then, the guy confidently raked through the demonic monster's body, hunting for the exact current of magical power to pinpoint where the beast-like Boar's magical stone was hidden. After a moment, Isagi pressed his palm down and pinpointed the exact magic flow on that beastly boar right there in the demonic monster's neck. He could feel it. Next, Isagi dove into his magic bag and yanked out a dagger. Then he squared up and lined its tip right at where the boar's magical power was surging. The boy sliced the monster's skin straight at the spot where the magical power surged, and right then, the boy and the black-haired girl saw something wild and never before seen. The soggy kid stared at it, frozen in pure shock. Before their eyes, the beastly boar's magic stone materialized massive, blazing with top-tier magic power, and it slammed them with the kind of monster prey haul they'd been hunting for. But the girl didn't buy it. She told him that this demonic monster, towering as it was just a medium threat in this forest, and those words shattered the guy so hard he went into deep shock. Because in the Imperial capital, monsters bigger than the size of your palm are almost never seen. But here, even a hulking boar-sized monster was totally normal to the locals. So Isagi turned to Mercia and grilled her about how many monsters prowled around Pomania village. She paused, then hit Isagi with a terrifying warning. If they didn't keep shrinking the monster count, a whole herd would storm their village. Pomania and Isagi froze, completely stunned. After all, he'd landed the perfect chance to grab a massive stash of top-tier magic stones, and now it was basically right there within reach. Isagi was all fired up, deciding to turn those magic stones into raw materials for a brand new fertilizer, because grinding them down was way quicker than building it from scratch with other magic-powered ingredients. Then the girl urged the guy to go hunt down beast-like monsters and scoop up a mountain of magic stones, and Isagi nodded hard, ready to kick off the search for their next target. Just when they were about to hunt their next monsters, a girl stepped in, and that pause saved the moment. Before they raced off for magic stones, Mercia turned to Isagi and finally had something to say. The boy stared at her, hanging on every word. She didn't want to waste a single bite. She wanted to take the demonic boar meat she'd just clawed out of the beast, because demon monster flesh was insanely tasty. And with those words, Mercia already dropped down onto the carcass, striking like she owned the fight. The boy got it the moment the girl spoke up. He bowed and apologized. Because Asagi was so lost in her head that all she could think about was hauling raw materials to make fertilizer, while Mercia needed a little time to wring meat from the demonic boar. Then Mercia surged into clearing the monsters. While the girl hacked the boar to pieces, the boy pulled a wooden barrel from his magic bag, and Usagi's stomach dropped as he realized this place was nothing like the Imperial Castle. To stay alive, they had to hunt and grab their own food like that merciless girl who carefully sliced up a demonic boar's carcass, piece by piece. Right beside her on the ground sat a whole pile of tools for gutting a beast-like boar, plus a bucket ready to soak up every messy spill, and the girl simply dumped all the meat straight into a wooden barrel. The boy clocked it again and again. He just stocked up on supplies and churned out whatever everyone ordered. Then he watched Mercia hack into that beastly boar carcass. Right as it got grisly, Asagi snapped, calling out to the black-haired girl and yanking her attention off the butcher work. After his call, Isagi stared at the girl and demanded she show him how to butcher a carcass too. Mercia didn't hesitate. She stood right beside the hanging boar so she could help him cut it up. Mercia froze for a split second when the boy blurted out his sudden request. Teach him how to cut up a monster carcass. And she snapped her head toward Asagi, stunned. Then, in the very next second, the girl beamed at him, and she nodded yes to Asagi's request, helping him learn how to cut up a carcass. After a bit, their tiny cloth bag swelled to the brim with magic stones. Then it hit them. The job was finally done. So Mercia told Asagi to head back to the village, and right there beside them lay the monster carcasses they'd just crushed, because that stack of magic stones was more than enough to whip up fresh fertilizer. The boy craved the village again, so he stepped forward right then. Isagi's foot hit something and he froze in place, cutting the journey short. Asagi dropped to one knee, stared at his palm in stunned silence, and realized it was stained with the dirt from the spot he'd just stepped on. The boy suddenly felt the forest floor shift under his feet. The soil's quality was changing, right in front of him, and it hit him. They'd pushed far deeper into the woods than he ever expected. That's why the boy refused to return to the village. Asagi was itching to push deeper into the forest's wild territories, so he told his companion, while Mercia calmly cleaned the daggers after slicing through demonic monsters. Then the boy thrust a finger at a mountain, miles away. Sagi instantly wondered if there was ore up there. And when the girl heard his question, she snapped her gaze toward the peak. She told him ore really was mined on that mountain. But Mercia snapped with worry, because if they rushed straight for it, the whole plan would drag on too long. But for the boy, everything was fine. Usagi leaned in and reassured the girl, saying that with alchemy's power, he could pinpoint the approximate location of the deposit, so the process wouldn't drag on nearly as long as she feared. Now Mercia wasn't worried anymore. That boy stared down the far-off mountain with raw determination, because if there were ore deposits up there, Asagi could forge even more golems and build bigger things, and he couldn't stop wanting to see it happen. Isagi burst out with excitement, telling his companion it was time to move and hunt for ore, because the ore deposits were already up on that mountain, right nearby. After a long stretch, they finally hauled themselves to the mountain they needed only to squeeze through a razor-thin path cut into the rock. The girl shot him worried glances the whole way, then finally asked, "Are you okay?" Saki insisted, "I'm okay." But inside, the fear and tension were gnawing at him because this mountain path was so narrow it basically dared him to slip, and one wrong step could send him tumbling straight off the cliff. He could barely make himself walk. His nerves were screaming, cold sweat streamed down his face as he feared one wrong step on that razor-thin mountain path and a fall. Meanwhile, Mercio glided down that narrow path like it was nothing. No fear, no hesitation. Because she'd done this kind of walk 1,000 times. And the guy in his head couldn't help but seethe with envy at how effortlessly she moved, even in her maid uniform. Then the girl snapped off the narrow trail and dropped straight down, hopping over the whole brutal descent so she could finally slide through the rest of the narrow paths with way less trouble. Asagi couldn't leap like that girl, so he dropped down and slogged through those razor-thin, deadly paths himself. Then a worn-out guy came up, and Mercia leaned in to tell him there was an underground passage right beside them. That boy panted hard, drenched in fatigue and fear as the narrow mountain path squeezed past like a trap. And after the brutal descent and clenching crossing of that thin road, Isagi was soaked in sweat and wiped out. Yet they finally made it to the spot they needed. Then the boy and the girl slipped into the underground passage they needed, and Isagi's eyes immediately caught how ancient it looked. Mercia leaned in and told him the truth. Because this tunnel was dug ages ago, time had been gnawing at it, wearing it down for years. Isagi stared at the underground passage and caught the trick. Burning the earth hardens it so the ceiling and walls won't cave in. Even though the wooden supports were ancient, they still held the weight like they meant it. He then asked the girls if he could reinforce the crumbling section of the underground passage, and Mercy wasted no time agreeing. Then the boy shot his hand up and unleashed his magic power right at the entrance. A massive magic circle flared into existence, and Isagi, powering through alchemy, rebuilt the whole underground passage stronger than ever. Soon enough, it all clicked. Mercia shored up the underground passage until it was solid and ready to be torn apart in search of ore deposits, and once she finished, she led the guy inside while Isagi stayed right there, waiting for her to go first. The girl slipped a little ahead of the guy, guiding him right into the underground passage while he paused at the entrance, scrutinizing every detail of how it was built. The moment Isagi stepped in, a heavy gloom hit him. This underground passage was just too dark, and it crushed his mood. In that dim maze, he couldn't study the layout or even navigate it properly. Then Isagi snapped back to the fact that the beast race could see perfectly in the dark, so the girl could move through the underground passage without a worry. Yet Mercia blurted out an instant apology because she'd completely forgotten to bring a lamp for him to light the way. So yeah, he pulls the lamp straight out of his magic bag, twists the button, and the thing bursts to life, lighting up the underground passage, all thanks to the stone sealed inside. Warm lamplight spilled down the underground hallway, and Isagi couldn't help but keep moving, clutching this glowing lamp to light his way. Turns out, it wasn't just any lantern. It was a magical device, shaped like a lamp, and Mercia stared at it in stunned shock. Then the girl grabbed the magic device and carried it herself, since Isagi had to stay locked in on finding or depositing the right thing, and the guy immediately thanked her for stepping in. After a while, they stumbled into the underground passage's darkest depths, the girl walking ahead with a lamp that carved bright light through the tunnels, while Isagi leaned in and studied the mine piece by piece. Because they weren't wandering here for fun, they were hunting for the deposits. Soon the boy leaned on his alchemist's instincts and zeroed in on the supposed location of the ore deposit, then whipped his finger and pointed the way forward. Then the guy strode up to the stone wall of the underground passage and pressed his palm to the exact spot through the alchemist's power. He felt something awaken within it. Right here in the stone wall of the underground passage, ore veins were packed so tight it was insane. Guy couldn't stop raving about it to his partner, while Mercia lit the way with a lamp, casting bright light down the corridor. Then she ditched the lamp somewhere and boom pulled a pickaxe out of thin air, ready to start digging into the ore deposits. But Isagi stopped her and told her she didn't need to do any of that. Honestly, the guy could have yanked that ore out of the wall a totally different way. So, does Seiji finally spell it all out to Mercia? And if alchemy can pump magical power through matter to beef up its properties, then wouldn't that also mean you can make it crumble easier, turning matter more fragile? Then the boy slammed his palms onto a cracked spot on the stone wall of that underground passage, and right there, a glowing magic circle burst to life. Because if you hit the weak points, the whole wall gives way. Benizagi used alchemy, and the magic circle surged, widening against the stone wall that blocked the underground passage, right where the obstacle had to be smashed. Soon enough, the ore they needed spilled right out of that wrecked spot where the magic circle had burst to life, and Isaki, clocking it immediately, pointed at the black-haired girl and told her to scoop up every piece that had rained onto the ground from the deposits. Then the kid pressed his palm back to the stone wall of the underground passage, like he was daring it to open up again, because Isaki was set on getting back to work, digging ore from the deposits. He spots the deposits in a blink and slaps marks on them. Then right on that instant, magic circles flare into existence across the stone wall, forged by alchemy, and he lines up his shot and nails the ore deposits. Marcia froze in shock. This girl was snatching almost every last ore that had slipped from the underground passage's stone wall and stuffing them into a bag. Then, in the next heartbeat, ores blasted out from the magic circles like they were tearing through reality. Isagi bolted forward, hunting for fresh ore deposits before anyone else could grab them. Ore stones of every kind kept blasting out of the wrecked stone walls and crashing onto the floor. Then Isagi suddenly snapped, "Mercia!" And the guy froze mid-step, twisting to face the black-haired girl. Turns out Mercia wanted the boy to ease up while searching for ore. Her legs were totally swallowed by ore all the way to her knees. Isagi snapped to his senses, realized he'd messed up, and blurted an apology to the black-haired girl, completely stunned. After a while, the girl finally broke free from that crushing pile of ore. Then Isagi told her they'd sort what they collected and extract it right here, and Mercia nodded and followed his command without hesitation. Then the boy plopped down beside the black-haired girl, and both of them studied every wet, hard-earned bit of ore like it mattered, while Mercia stayed cool, patiently rifling through the piles as if she already knew what he'd find, with a lamp burning right beside them to light up every last detail. Soon the boy snapped to it. They weren't just digging up rocks, they'd uncovered tons of different ores: iron, copper, lead, and even magic ore. Plus they'd scored a bit of gold and some precious stones too. Asagi kept digging through the ore stones, studying every one like it might crack the answer. But just like he guessed, the sacks never contained a single trace of adamantite or mithril. The girl said she never expected anything less from Mystery Saga, and the guy's eyes snapped wide at her sudden words. He had no clue what she was talking about, just stared at Mercia with a totally lost, blank expression. Then she leaned in and told him that this drilling tech was about to be everywhere, and with that single speech, she basically called out how insanely good Asagi really was. Asagi told her the truth that alchemists were really shipped straight into the extraction chambers, and because living there was brutal, the nobility treated it like the ultimate hard labor. With Asagi, they really did send him there again and again. Those boys still froze up at the memory. The brutal hard labor was awful, and Mercia couldn't stop worrying as their mood turned sour. The next second, the guy snapped back to himself, shoved the nasty memories of that place to the back of his mind because Asagi had to start breaking down the ore they just received right then. Then the boy thrust his open palms straight toward the ore, and Asagi went for it, trying to pour magic power into it. Right after that, his magic power slammed into the ore, then boom, that ugly lump twisted into a clean ingot, completely reshaping its structure as if it had never been ore at all. The girl managed to snatch one finished ingot of the processed stuff in a single day. The surface was so smooth, it caught its own reflection, basically a mirror, and the girl stared at the processed ore ingot in pure, awestruck disbelief. The guy kept hammering through fresh ores, desperate to speed things up, while the girl snapped out of the shock and started helping him right away. Soon, the boy and the girl sank back into silence and kept working. Asagi was locked in, sorting and processing the ore he'd just received, while the girl stayed calm by his side, stepping in to help whenever he needed it. After a while, he'd smashed through almost every kind of ore, leaving the floor littered with ingots of all sizes, and when he finally looked over the hall, he knew it was time to get out of that underground passage. The girl grilled the boy about whether they'd hauled tons of ore out of that mountain. They'd stacked up a huge pile, enough that Asagi was convinced they could forge a whole lot of things from it. The boy lit up at the chance to boost his golem numbers, while Asagi buzzed with excitement to power up the main field and build smarter farm tools that would rake in bigger harvests. Asagi was exploding with joy. He didn't just build these, he can actually create them for real. The girl didn't get a word, so she grabbed the guy and asked what he meant. Then Asagi snapped his gaze to the black-haired girl and met Mercia with a smug, satisfied look, while the guy just refused to answer her question. After a while, they were already in the village, standing on empty land, just a stone's throw from their home. And that's when Asagi lit up and excitedly told the black-haired girl he wanted to build his workshop right there. The girl froze at his words, then fired back. "Tell me again, what about the workshop?" Asagi leaned in and told her, if the alchemy goes wrong, that explosion could rip through the whole building, and even if it doesn't, the fumes will stink up everything. So he insisted on building a workshop far from the house. Then Mercia stepped in and offered to help him with building the workshop, but Asagi flat out refused he'd handle it himself. Then the guy swung the conversation somewhere else. He told Marcia that the second harvest season was already here, so if she wanted to truly help him, she'd better pitch in and work the fields with the other villagers. Marcia listened, hanging on every word. The boy had already spun away from the departing Marcia, while the girl clutched her basket and marched straight for the fields, ready to team up with her village and haul in the second season's harvest. Now Asagi was stuck alone with his own thoughts. This guy was itching to get straight to work, because a mountain of tasks was waiting for him with the new workshop build, so he pushed to start it ASAP. First, he knew he had to lock in the workshop's size, so he started pacing it out, counting with every step like that would solve it. Asagi, though, he had dreams bigger than the walls, pushing for a huge workshop. Since a giant workshop would have been a nightmare to keep running, he ditched the idea, then marked out everything with tape and post, lining himself up to match the exact size of the house he needed. Asagi knew he didn't have to split his workshop into rooms at all. One workbench and a storage corner inside the same building was all he needed, so he kicked back and started unwinding the tape. Soon, the boy was using tape and post to lay out his workshop spot, and it hit the exact size he had in mind, only to realize it was bigger than the plot his house sat on. After a while, the boy hauled in building supplies for his workshop: wet, soggy wood for the house frame, plus bricks to crank up the strength. Then it was time to mix the mortar. Then the boy yanked a wooden box out and slammed it onto the ground, poured cement and sand straight from a cloth bag into it, and stacked them up in a perfect 1:3 ratio. Isagi grabbed the alchemical method and stirred the whole batch until it turned into one smooth, instant-ready mass. Then he slapped a magic circle onto the box packed with the cement and sand so everything blended perfectly. Next, you punched a hole dead in the middle of the box, poured in the water bit by bit, and stirred until it turned smooth again. Once the lumps vanish and the whole mix thickens, you're finally ready. Soon the mortar in the wooden box was ready, and just like they hoped, it came out thick, smooth, and totally free of lumps. Then the boy started stacking bricks along the outer wall, firing them into place with his magic power brick by brick while sealing everyone with cement, all powered by a magic circle. Then Isagi slammed cement over them and started stacking bricks again, watching him repeat the same relentless rhythm, brick after brick, cover after cover. Soon, Isagi's workshop was practically standing. Most of the job was already finished. All that was left was one last push, finishing the roof. The kid stared at his workshop, like it was finally about to become real. Isagi started sweating bullets from all that non-stop work building the workshop. And once the guy saw it nearly done, he only had one thought. Even before the place was fully built. Just after laying bricks, it already felt warm and inviting. Then the guy's mind started racing with the next move, so he threw himself back into building his workshop. He was dying to handle the interior decoration himself. After a while, the girl came back from the fields clutching a basket in both hands. She'd already helped the other villagers finish the harvest. Beep! Then the girl wheeled toward the workshop and shouted at the guy, like she just couldn't wait any longer. She wanted to know how his workshop build was going. Right then, the girl finally got a clear view of the guy's workshop, and Mercy's froze in place, staring with pure awe. Right in front of her, a tall, beautiful brick house suddenly rose into view. Simple, not flashy, but warm and inviting. And just beside it, a box of boards sat there like proof. The place was still brand new. Then the girl headed for the built workshop right there on the street, and the second she heard the guy's voice, Isagi breathed easy because the rooms finally looked like a real alchemist's workshop. Mercer quietly rapped on the workshop door and asked Isagi if she could come in, and the second he heard her voice still mid-task, he waved her inside without hesitation. Then the girl swung open Isagi's workshop door. But she didn't step inside. Mercy froze right at the entrance, staring. Because the moment she caught sight of what was inside, she was completely stunned. A perfectly placed lit room greeted the girl, windows glowing as soon as she stepped inside, tables already packed with alchemical gear, open boxes scattered across the floor, and Isagi hunched over her work, frantically arranging everything. He stared at the frozen girl, completely awkward. Then Isagi blurted that he was only there for interior design. Marcia just watched the guy, awestruck and silent. She praised the guy for how the house looked, saying the workshop's walls were gorgeous outside and the inside decorations were just as stunning. Then Isagi's cheeks instantly flushed because her words filled him with pure joy. Then this guy burst out, thrilled out of his mind, rambling non-stop about his workshop, how he tweaked the wood resin mix to dim the walls and cut the glare way down. When Isagi did it, the light's reflectivity shifted and the whole room warmed up. No harsh glare. Then he kept talking, drawing Kraden with non-stop workshop line enthusiasm. And on top of everything, he wanted his house to feel like an old antique dream. So he bricked up one wall. Isagi was totally hooked on how he built that workshop, and Mercia just listened, smiling warmly as she watched him light up. With a sweet smile, the girl congratulated the guy for finishing the building, because now he finally had the perfect workshop for his experiments and research, and that meant Mercia was genuinely happy for him. Isagi flashed her a smile, thanked her sweetly, then before she could even breathe, he stepped right up to Mercy's face, and the girl's cheeks lit up like crazy from the close contact, while Isagi, totally oblivious, happily announced that now he could finally do all the research he wanted. With his closeness making her cheeks burn, the girl snapped her head away, red as a tomato, then blurted that she'd help him rearrange the furniture. Isagi nodded and agreed. Then it hit the boy. He suddenly remembered. Isagi turned to the black-haired girl and asked her to set up a bed in the workshop so he could crash and take a nap there. Mercia immediately shut him down and refused to give him a bed in the workshop, leaving the guy staring in shock, desperate to figure out why she snapped back so fast. Mercy shot him a dark look and warned him that if she put a bed in his workshop, he'd always sleep there, so he wouldn't have to get up and deal with himself in the house, since she knew he'd get too lazy to go inside. Isagi stared at her like her words had hit him in the chest, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find a single reason to shut her down, so he had to accept everything the black-haired girl said. Mercia refused to budge. This time was the one thing she wouldn't back down on, because she wouldn't let Asagi win. And the moment he understood it, he realized she could see right through him. So the guy tried to play it safe. He wanted to ask her about anything but a bed yet. Mercy already knew what he had in mind, and she shut him down hard. No sofa in the workshop. Mercia, lips puffed in a pout, snapped that all of this was for the boy's healthy lifestyle. So she fired back, furious, that he should sleep properly in his own house. Asagi, under the crushing pressure of the moment, awkwardly nodded along with pouting Mercia, and accepted the brutal truth. He wasn't getting any sleep in his workshop. Then he instantly dodged the heat and shifted the topic, trying to stop the black-haired girl from pressing him further. He told her to start making fertilizer right away, and Mercia jumped in to help. To make fertilizer fit Paminia's soil, they hauled materials straight from the forests and the mines in town, and Isagi's mind instantly flashed back to that demonic boar and the underground passage packed with ores. And finally, this was the day they'd whip up new fertilizer, so the boy clutched the plant in his hands, set it down on the table, and found every other ingredient already laid out, while Mercier slid him a drawing board. First, they'd need 3 kinds of fertilizer, the Paminia villagers already used, and the boy just stared at the 3 bags sitting on the table. Then Isagi leaned in and grilled Mercia about what happened after Paminia village boosted those 3 kinds of fertilizer. She straight up started her report. She leaned in and told him straight from the document that the fertilizers from Pamania were still worse than the Empire's. Mercia scribbled every progress detail into a document, then shoved it into Isagi's hand so he could read it. Asagi scanned the document and snapped to the only one thing that had to limit the current fertilizer, and the moment he saw those table markings, the guy stared back with a grim, serious look. He figured mixing the fertilizer with another raw material would be the smarter move. Then Mercia snapped back that doing it that way would eat up a ton of time. He realized that starting fertilizer production from scratch could take years, maybe longer, but the Empire's fertilizer data was already sitting in that document. They were also stacked with plenty of top-notch magic stones, and the boy grinned as he showed the black-haired girl the ones he just pulled from the monsters. So he had nothing to worry about. The girl squinted at Asagi like, "Wait, are you sure?" Because they only ever pulled those magic stones from monsters out in the forest, so she couldn't believe they'd be this top tier, and then the guy flat out confirmed the quality was absolutely excellent. Then he told her that in the Imperial capital, one of those magic stones costs a whopping 20 silver coins, and Mercio nearly lost his breath at how ridiculously expensive they were. In Palminia, their village, magic stones usually cost just 1 measly silver coin, so when Isagi heard the price, his jaw dropped so hard the stone in his hand slipped right out. Still reeling from it all, the boy blurts to the black-haired girl, asking face full of disbelief, if magic stones are just normal everyday things back in her village of Palminia. She nodded thoughtfully and told him, "Yeah, magic stones aren't special here. They're everywhere." And then added, "In our area, everyone's got at least one." Asagi was hit with even more shock, and he swallowed her answer in a drained, defeated voice. When he saw that boy wilt the moment her words landed, Mercia stared at him, completely puzzled. Then the guy snapped back to himself and grinned at his reflection in the magic stone like it was nothing. Because of course he was going to turn this into top-tier fertilizer, no doubt about it. And Asagi said it straight to his partner. Then they jumped right back into work first. Asagi demanded they test something big. He wanted to mix the magic stone into the fertilizer, so he turned to Mercia and asked her to set up the pots for the experiment. And the girl nodded, then dashed off to make it happen. Meanwhile, that wasn't even what you were trying to do. You wanted to control the magic power. Then the guy snatched the magic stone, and it instantly shot up into the sky like it had a mind of its own. To wrestle the stone's wild, disordered magic into control, the boy had to force it into perfect balance. And the moment he gripped it, the magic stone started spilling raw power into his hands. At that exact moment, the magic stone shot higher and raw magic power started pouring out like it couldn't hold back anymore. Isagi seized the moment, steering the flow of that magic stone with pure confidence. After a while, the magic stone finally settled, its power lining up clean and calm. Then Isagi, with alchemy, scrubbed out every last foreign impurity. Soon it was all set above Isagi's hand. A glowing magic stone hovered in the air, purified and refined from foreign leftovers, and Isagi grinned like it was game time. When the magic stone was finally cleaned and lined up, Mercia rolled in with a mountain of pots. And the moment she did, Isagi thanked the black-haired girl for bringing them. That magic stone Isagi processed practically yanked the girl's attention, and its look was totally different from the others, cleaned up and purified until the impurities were gone. So Mercy leaned in and stared at it like it was something special. The girl stared in awe at the finished magic stone. It shimmered with a clean, vivid purple glow. Isaji leaned in to tell her that in the Empire, the aristocrats wore them as jewelry. Mercy just stared at that gorgeous magic stone, eyes sparkling with awe, and she couldn't stop thinking about it. What else could these incredible stones possibly do? After a while, Mercy stared in sheer horror as that guy cold-bloodedly crushed those gorgeous magic stones and mixed them into fertilizer, but Isaji didn't care how they looked, he just heartlessly smashed them to pieces. Still, the guy clocked how shaken she was and apologized to the black-haired girl anyway, because she was absolutely glowing over the magic stones, even as Mercia felt a sting of disappointment over the damage. The girl tried to sound calm as she told the boy that a magic stone was just a thing, so it didn't have to scare her, yet her eyes stayed locked on the pots, heavy with sadness. Then the girl bolted off to grab more pots for Isagi, while the boy kept grinding the stone without missing a beat, yet Isagi couldn't shake his worry as Mercia disappeared. He clocked the girl's heartbreak as that beautiful magic stone shattered, her animal ears drooping with pure sorrow, and Isaki vowed to show up next time with some magic stone jewelry to lift her spirits. The boy nodded to himself. Yeah, this was just another reason he had to keep pushing. And Isaji kept grinding those ingredients, whipping up a fresh fertilizer for the soil of Pamania village. The boy tossed the magic stone full of dense, fast-spreading grass, a terraria blend built to shrug off insects, and genji that boosts biodegradability. Then he whipped it all together with whatever wild materials they'd hauled back from the forest. Soon, the boy whipped up a prototype of his brand-new fertilizer. Then Mercia, hand in hand with her partner, urged him to test it right away. Next, they scribbled a fresh number on the pot with ink. This was their very first try, so they painted a big 1. Then they shoveled in the soil. Right after that, they dropped a selectively bred arugula seed into the pot's soil, buried it under fresh dirt, and gave it a satisfying pour of water. Right then, a tiny arugula sprout burst out of the pot and shot up from the seed like it had superpowers. Isagi froze, stunned by how lightning fast it grew. Right after that, the plant kept growing. No pause at all, and soon arugula shot from a tiny sprout into a fully grown, mature plant. Isagi's eyes lit up as he stared at the fully ripened arugula. Those thick, nutritious bunches were piling up fast because it had grown like wildfire. Isagi stared at the arugula and, wow, couldn't stop himself from admiring how insanely fast it grew with that fertilizer, and he was just seconds away from scribbling the results onto the experimental sheet. But just when everyone expected it to stop, that arugula plant kept going, shooting up higher and higher until it towered over the boy and the girl, and Isagi just stared, stunned with pure delighted shock. That arugula shot up like a monster, towering for meters. Then its stems changed overnight, swelling into huge, thick stalks from lightning-fast growth and heavy nutrition, and the pot started shaking right away from the insane speed. Mercia stared at the plant's wild, lightning-fast growth, eyes wide, while the boy watched in pure shock as the arugula shot up until it nearly kissed the ceiling. Then its branches clamped onto the wooden boards above. Mercio casually warned Isagi that if the arugula plant grew 1 more inch, the workshop's walls and ceiling would straight up collapse. So the second the words landed, fear hit the boy like a punch. Then Isagi sprinted to the arugula pot, jammed his palms straight at the stem's base, and at the exact same time, the boy sent the pot crashing over. At that exact moment, Isagi dumped magic power into the plant and blasted its roots out, shutting it down for good so it couldn't keep choking the house. Then he slammed the whole destroyed plant down onto the floor, right off the table like alchemy had burned it to pieces. Isagi's stomach dropped when he realized this was way too dangerous. He stared at the plant he'd knocked over, eyes dark, because curiosity had nearly ruined his brand new workshop. Then the girl gasped, saying they never dreamed the plant could explode like this. Mercy was sure it was the thick, densely packed grass doing all the heavy lifting, but Air argued it had to be the kick from the synergy of high-quality magic power. And either way, it still ended up being their first experiment that failed, if that's how it works. Isagi wants to yank magic power straight out of the magic stone. And it looks like you've got to pick the right one, or the potion won't brew the way you need. To forge the perfect fertilizer for Pomerania Village's soil, he just had to test every last idea, one after another. Then the boy stared at the plant that still dared to grow on his failed mix, lost in deep thought. Then Isagi grinned at the girl and told her this fertilizer job wouldn't be a walk in the park, they'd have to push hard for a real result. While meanwhile, Mercia was scrubbing away the failed arugula plant. With a warm smile, she backed his words right up, while Mercia clutched a pot of plants in her hands, hoping she'd finally be useful to him, as they made fertilizer for the village of Pamania. While time kept slipping by, rain hammered the outside world. But the boy and the girl still stayed locked in the workshop, unshaken by the storm. They slapped on the same signature number plate again, This was their second experiment, and Asagi dropped more arugula seeds into a fresh pot, soaked in a brand new fertilizer. Still, the outcome matched the last experiment. Arugula shot up again, towering into wild, enormous sizes. And Asagi already knew exactly what to do next. By now, this was already his 73rd experiment, and this time it backfired in the worst way. The plant swelled back to normal size. Then, right on cue, it shriveled, died, and Isagi snapped with rage. Even the next fertilizer experiment left them fuming. After they planted sweet pepper, the fruit showed up. Then everything drooped and withered anyway, just like before. And Mercio's worries started to burn hot. Some time had slipped by. Late evening had turned the world dark. But the boy and girl were still locked in the workshop, grinding through experiments, desperate to crack the perfect fertilizer. Their experiment count had already busted past 10. These were their 200th trials now. And the girl was back at it, gluing those same unique signs onto fresh clay pots. Meanwhile, Isagi slumped at his desk and, with tired hands and a tight mind, scribbled fresh fertilizer recipes while dissecting every flaw from his past experiments until crumpled sheets piled up around him like a battlefield of mistakes. Then he paused from brewing new fertilizer recipes and raised his gaze. Isagi offered a weary smile, eyes drifting without landing on any one spot. Seeing him and Marcia grind through those same experiments over and over to make it better, it hit him hard, like the days back when they lived in the Empire. The boy got swept up in a wave of nostalgia from that memory. Then reality hit, and he had to keep grinding to perfect the fertilizer recipes. After a while, they kicked off another experiment, and the table was littered with shattered pots and dead-end results. The boy and girl dropped the same pepper seed into a fresh new pot. Then Mercia leaned in and slowly poured water over the pot with the planted seed, while Shinisaji clenched up, terrified a single mistake would ruin everything because the boy was already set to rip out the failed alchemy experiment. Right after they watered the soil, the seed shot up and popped into a sprout right then. No waiting. And this is already their 250th experiment with fertilizer. Isagi and Mercio stared at the sprout with clenched, tense eyes. Then they went still with anticipation as it shot up fast, turning into a thriving pepper plant loaded with ripe, sweet fruits. That plant looked unreal. Its sweet pepper fruits, blazing with ripe, juicy perfection, and Isagi and Marcia froze when they saw the growth had stopped cold. Mercy told him even the plant's stem and leaves were perfectly normal, with zero weird growth, and she sealed it by confirming the plant's results matched the Empire's fertilizer exactly. That could only mean one thing. Asagi slammed against the table, frozen in stunned silence, then whispered, shaking with disbelief, that it was all finally ready. Then the boy, tears sparkling with joy, grabbed the pot and watched their successful fertilizer experiment finally pay off. 3 whole weeks of non-stop, selfless work leading to this moment. They whipped up fertilizer using nothing but stuff from the village, and suddenly the whole fertilizer shortage nightmare vanished for good. Isagi burst out, loud and happy, agreeing with the black-haired girls, and just like that, the village's crops were finally going to be safe. The boy dropped to the ground at once, because he suddenly realized something terrifying. He was the only alchemist in the whole village. If he fell, the fertilizer production would grind to a halt. Then Mercy pushed the boy to hand the fertilizer recipe to the city's alchemists, hoping they could brew more for everyone, but Isagi worried they wouldn't be able to copy it, not with their limited skill and shaky alchemy. So Mercia leaned in, buzzing, and pitched another idea, an easier recipe. But Isagi hesitated, because he had no clue just how terrifyingly good the city's alchemists really were. For a beat, the room went dead quiet. Mercia slumped, defeated because she couldn't find the right way out, while Isagi stared on, locked in, already cooking up a solution. But there wasn't a fix, so the boy and girl shoved the whole problem aside for later, refusing to deal with anything complicated. And then the fertilizer finally hit during their 250th second experiment. The very next morning, Asagi thanked the girl for the meal she cooked, and the veggies they'd been treated to were so good even Mercier nodded along. While that went down, the boy hauled the dirty dishes to the sink, and the girl was right there washing them. Then Isagi stepped in to help her wash the dishes, and the guy immediately started scrubbing. Mercy thanked him for his help. Sagi started to realize that every time he and Marcia teamed up, their chats would suddenly fizzle, and an awkward silence would slam into the space between them. But somehow, this didn't make the boy feel awkward at all, and that just made Isagi keep scrubbing the dishes with a warm, steady smile. Then he was about to say something to the girl. Isagi told Mercia that when they stood side by side and did chores together, they looked exactly like a married couple. And the second those words hit, the girl shuddered hard, her face snapping red in an instant. Mercia's cheeks burned as she spun away from the boy, rattling the words about the married couple again with pure embarrassment. Then her voice cracked, and she started to stutter. desperate to say something to him. Just as she opened her mouth, a loud knock slammed through their house. Someone was here for the alchemist, Asagi. The man shoved the girl aside, said he'd handle the door, and told her to keep right on washing the dishes. Then Asagi saw it instantly. Mercia was furious about something, her face turning gloomy and her cattail whipping back and forth like a warning flag, and when she finally spoke in that same downbeat voice, she insisted that everything was fine. Asagi was already charging toward the door when, in his head, he figured Mercia was miserable, because that black-haired girl wouldn't even bother to wash the dishes. Hue swung the door open and met the stranger. Right then, a bag slid into view in front of him. Asagi didn't see a single soul around, and he was stunned there was nobody, until a voice called him from below. A tiny little girl, short like a dwarfen beastkin through and through, hauled a gigantic, gut-busting backpack strapped to her back. The moment he saw her, he clocked her as a beast race, girl straight up a dogkin. And when he noticed how tiny she was, he instantly assumed she was just a little kid. Then the girl lit up and introduced herself, Konya. She worked for the trading company Wonderful, and she'd come straight to him for serious negotiations with Asagi. Asagi was caught off guard, so when they said they wanted to negotiate with him, he froze, and the girl brightened and confirmed it on the spot, then asked for his okay to handle the talks and hash out every detail inside his house. He finally clicks with what's going on, then opens the door and lets her in, guiding her straight to the reception area, while she rushes out a heartfelt apology for barging into his house. Konya sprinted up the front stairs to slip into the house, and at the same time the girl kept her massive backpack on her shoulders. That's why her massive, completely packed backpack blocked her from getting into Asagi's house. She shoved at the door with all her strength. But Asagi just told her flat out that it wouldn't fit through his front entrance. So Konya had no choice. She had to dump that giant stuffed backpack outside her house and leave it sitting alone on the ground. After she finally slid into the chair, she quickly apologized for the trouble she caused. But Konya still wanted to say something to Asagi and the black-haired girl, only she couldn't bring herself to remember her name. Then the room fell dead silent. She had no idea how to start talking, and Mercy couldn't shake it, because Kanye just kept staring at her way too long, like it meant something. Then Kanye leaned in with pure admiration and asked the boy, "So, is Mercia your wife?" And it completely blindsided the girl with that sudden, wild question. The boy practically blurted out, bursting with joy that this girl would be his servant, and that she was also the village chief's daughter. While Marcia, on the other hand, trembled uncontrollably, overwhelmed by every emotion at once. Then Konya, red-faced with awkwardness, apologized to the girl for her question. Mercia just beamed and waved it off like it was nothing, and then she cheerfully told everyone she was going to go make tea. Asagi caught the girl humming as she walked off, and he froze. Mercy was actually in a good mood. Just days ago, she'd been raging and snapping about everything, miserable and furious with no end in sight. Mercia's mood kept flipping fast, and it made him overthink everything, while a woman's heart still felt like a locked mystery to him. Then the girl with the warm smile, clutching a tray, turned and headed off toward the kitchen. Soon, Mercia burst in with the tea she'd whipped up, and Konya and Nia stared at it in total disbelief. Then it was all laughs and good vibes as Asagi, Mercia, and Konya hung out together. And when Konya realized they were really enjoying her, she couldn't help but feel wildly flattered by the tea. After Konya, the dog snatched the cup in her paws, leaned in, and tasted the tea that girl had lovingly prepared. Konya lit up and told them the tea didn't just burn it. Had this sneaky little sweetness underneath, so yeah, it was seriously tasty. Konya leaned in, desperate to know what Mercia used, and Mercia revealed she steeped wolfberry leaves she'd gathered from right nearby in the forest. Konya lit up the moment she heard it, snatched her notebook, and scribbled down that tea made from wolfberry leaves. Brew it right, and you'll get a flavor so wonderful it'll knock your socks off. Konya demanded it, then told them to buy it. The girl snapped open her notebook and scribbled everything she'd just been told, and Asagi froze because she pulled it out of nowhere. While the girl was busy scribbling everything she knew about wolfberry leaves, Asagi leaned in and whispered to Mercia about this amazing trading company, then asked what it was really all about. Mercia told him that Wonderful was a massive trading giant, even across the Beast Kingdom, because they weren't just tucked in the royal capital with a main office. They also ran branches in lots of cities, and every single worker was a half-human from the dog race. He was completely stunned. This was a massive company, and he couldn't wrap his head around why a businesswoman named Konya from it would show up and come straight to him. Soon the girl scribbled every detail into her notebook, then slammed it shut and immediately apologized to them for making them wait. Konya straight up told them she'd just spotted a sudden surge of top-tier crops flooding the markets, and the boy along with Mercia went completely wide-eyed in shock. Cognan couldn't help but grin. These crops shot up fast and could be harvested no matter the season, and they tasted way better than anything he'd seen grow in the animal kingdom before. Chasing the truth behind that incredible crop, she ended up plowing straight into the village of Puminia, and the journey there was no short walk. Mercia realized she was talking about the harvest in Pumini village, and Asaji clocked it too, her whole reason for showing up. With their harvest booming lately, the merchants had to be fanning out to other villages to trade. That's how Konya finally figured it out. Isagi was the reason the harvest had exploded in growth, and the girl instantly bought it, tail whipping back and forth as raw excitement hit her hard. Plumina village's crops were being grown all over, yet no one could match their results except Asagi, and that made it feel downright strange to her. Konya was left staring in shock at his answer. Isagi leaned in and told her he'd crafted these crops with alchemy just for this land's soil. Yeah, they grew easy here, but try it elsewhere and you'd never hit the same quality. And Konya finally got it. It all came down to the soil. She couldn't believe it. Alchemy was being used for farming, and they were using its power to pick the perfect crops. So she quickly scribbled every detail into her notebook. Isagi nodded along with Konya's words, and she immediately kept scribbling in her notebook. Like any sharp businesswoman from a massive trading company, she caught every detail fast, and her imagination was just as strong. Soon the girl slammed her pen down, filled her notebook with everything, and snapped it shut because she was done with the details and ready to dive straight into the real negotiations. Konya leaned in and asked Asaji if he could sell his harvest wholesale to that amazing trading company every single time, on a regular basis, and Asaji, with Mercia right there, nearly fell over from how shocking that offer was. Then it hit him. Those supplies around the village weren't infinite, and they couldn't afford to waste a thing, because their lifeline was the crucial connection to a big trading company. So he wasn't refusing the offer. He was setting demands, and Konya pushed to hear exactly what those conditions were before the negotiations even began. Isagi then told her the truth. He was an alchemist. If he didn't have the right materials, he couldn't make a thing. So he demanded they deliver exactly what he needed, and they had to prioritize it. The girl heard his demand to deliver the materials he needed for alchemy, then just gave them a small, calm nod and a peaceful smile. With a proud grin, she told him, "Don't sweat it. Our trading company can handle anything. As long as there was something out there, the Beast Kingdom had it, and they could get it." Then Isagi leaned in and grilled the girl about alchemy materials beyond the Empire, but Konya flinched and looked away, stuck in that awkward hesitation, because she couldn't promise a single thing. The guys finally ran out of questions. Then Konya leaned in and asked the big one. Just how much can Mercia and Isagi sell wholesale, and can they hold that steady? Because when trade rides on an answer like that, it can't be ignored. He didn't stumble. He came prepared, pulled out a document detailing the current harvest volume, and that set things up so the whole discussion could zip along, cutting the chatter and steering the trade talks fast. Konya started stalking the weekly yields like they were the key to everything. She demanded to know how much harvest they could actually deliver. And honestly, that might be the most crucial question of them all. Mercia, brimming with confidence, told Mr. Asaji that his upgraded varieties made the impossible doable and that the amount of work would match the amount of supplies. Kanye was blown away by how hard the boys were committed to the grind, and you could practically see them itching to jump into trading. She couldn't believe how fast everything moved. Those guys can fire off cargo every single week. She asked if they could boost the supplies volume so the work would run even faster and hit harder. Saki couldn't shake the thought because cranking up the real volume isn't exactly easy. Right now, the only workers left are Golem's crew and the guys themselves. If they keep pushing that hard in the fields, they'll burn out with zero strength left for anything else. He starts mapping out how to blend fertilizer production, pick the right crop varieties, and even lock down the maker of magical instruments. And it's still way too soon for him to throw himself into work like a real farmer. Before all that, he still had a ton of work to handle, and the moment for something this serious just hadn't arrived yet. So Konya pushed for hiring people to run the fields, and that would make everything so much easier. Asaji and Marcia kept echoing the exact words that were spoken. It took them just a few heartbeats to clock that this was actually the in move, and they'd never once realized the job could be handed off to someone else. Isagi couldn't believe it. How had he never thought of something that simple before? He figured it was because he'd always been the type to get shoved into work until he hit exhaustion, and he'd never once imagined it was even possible. The girl calls Konya's idea a genius. She tells Asaji to stop chasing everything and start studying alchemy, then hand the fieldwork off to others so they can grow even more wild varieties of vegetables and fruits. He slammed his hand into a fist. Now Asagi's fired up. He's dead set on what Konya told him to do. That guy's about to turn the free land into a huge open field, and it's about to spark a massive breakthrough for their whole operation. Pugna pointed at the huge field and said they'd turn it into a farm. Isagi and Mercy's minds raced again like, somehow, that same simple idea still hadn't landed on them this time either. But hey, no panic. The real win was that they finally learned what mattered. The three of them sat at a table out in a massive, endless field, and Isagi's eyes lit up, because leveling up an entire farm sounded insanely amazing. This will help him lock in trade for good and also let him personally grow new varieties on his own. Isagi can already picture himself growing mountains of crops on a massive farm and shipping every last crate to market, while Kanya can't wait for the company to sell those goods far and wide, everywhere. Isagi and Kanmakariot's profit-hungry aura flared so hot it actually pushed Mercy's back. Konya can already tell how brutal the road ahead is for them, so she reaches out her hand, gives the guy a warm wish, and prays his big farm brings nothing but prosperity. From this moment on, the guy can't wait to team up with the trading company. Mercio's just relieved everything worked out like this. And now, they've got even more chances to grow brand new plants over time. He stared at the staff like, okay, what now? And started plotting. Should he hire contract workers from the trading company? Brilliant, right? It would knock out some of their headaches. But he still knew he had to dig up a few more ways to crush this problem. Still, this wasn't the smartest move, so the guy decided to hit the village first and recruit workers there, because if there weren't enough locals, someone had to go ask for help. Then this girl swooped in and pressed a glass of drink into the guy's hands. Isagi asks her if the villagers will show up for the job posting like always, and that simple question hits hard, because he's freaking out over not knowing how this whole thing will turn out. Honestly, things in the village have gotten way better on the food front lately. And that's got him wondering, does anyone actually want to work his farm right now? Even though they've already got enough to feed themselves? The girl is dead sure that no matter what, someone will always end up showing up. Seriously, every resident feels deep gratitude for that guy, because he's been doing nothing but good deeds, and he even taught them all sorts of things. Isagi wants everyone working on his farm to feel like they're gaining something real, and the girl finally gets it. Her master is generous to the bone and cares about people more than he has to. Then he lifts the drink in his hands, and that cozy warmth of the glass spreads straight into his palms. The girl clocks it instantly. Her master's got a heart of pure gold. She's convinced that to rake in profit, they can breed new varieties the guy hasn't even handed out to the villagers yet. Then suddenly, everyone has a reason to show up for a job interview. Wouldn't it be awesome if new varieties could be bred only in one special place, and if the locals could race them for themselves, they'd be over the moon? The girl pitched a plan to plant fruit trees like apples and bananas. A few seconds later, the girl with glowing eyes leaned in and suggested planting grapes, like she couldn't wait a second longer to get her hands on those berries. Isagi threw out an apology and admitted the grapes were still stuck in the development phase. The girl snapped in heartbreak when she heard the news, and then the guy finally realized she loved grapes more than anyone could have guessed. She refused to answer and only demanded to be told when the grapes would be perfect meanwhile. Isagi is already spinning in his head about where to kick off his business, because they've got a mountain of work waiting and it'll take strict order and a real structure. He's hunting for 5 workers, but the real tide of transactions and profit is still a mystery. So he's setting a test, running the job with a small crew first, then ramping up the main income once the work proves there's plenty to go around. The girl leaned in and told the guy she was heading to her father to get permission to recruit people for the job, then she bolted out of the room. Isagi truly prays that everything finally runs perfect and smooth. After all, running a huge farm is pure backbreaking work. 5 days had gone by since Isagi posted those recruitment notices. Then, mid-book, a girl burst in like trouble on wheels and dropped a major news bomb. Mercia sprinted into the room, gasping for air. Isagi demanded to know if anyone had answered his recruitment requests, and the girl's face went pale with shock. Turns out they got flooded with applications, so many that they'd amassed over 10 times the number of workers they even needed. A massive crowd swarmed the guy's place, all begging for a shot at the work and help on the farm. Nobody saw it coming, because the number of people lining up for interviews was insane. A huge crowd surged to the house's entrance, all eyes locked on the door like something was about to explode. The guys totally didn't see this massive wave of job applicants coming. The first candidate they pulled up? Turns out he was a mutual friend of Isagi and Mercia. Turns out it was Nia she'd applied to. The girl can't help laughing, because if the salary's always solid and the job sounds genuinely interesting, who in their right mind wouldn't take it? Nayeon's eyes scanned the crowd and she realized there were way more candidates than anyone expected. Isagi admitted he'd love to hire every single person who's trying to get in, but he can't, because he's got to cut the crowd down and decide through interviews. Nia and the others chopped through the noise and stole Asaji's focus. Her face lit up so hard it was basically kitten cute, and she leaned in to ask him, "So, are we friends?" Then she dropped the real hint like, "Work on the farm would be great." In the blink of an eye, Mercia slid in behind the girl, and her stare screamed trouble. The girl shut the job candidate down with one look in mere seconds, and somehow that only made her feel weirdly awkward. The girl snapped that the interview was happening, no exceptions, so we shoved her aside and made her get in line. The girl's argument slammed into the guy's ears, and suddenly he felt painfully awkward just listening in. So, yeah, Isaki had zero clue his farm would attract a crowd of people who actually wanted to work it, and seeing that many hands ready to jump in left him genuinely thrilled, because now he could finally build the team he'd been dreaming of. Now the interview kicked off and Asaji hurried in, bowing hard to apologize for the wait. Then he jumped straight into action. Emercy was loaded with work from the start because they had to dig through every single job candidate and analyze them all. Asagi leaned in and listened to every single person who came to pitch their candidacy, because he couldn't walk away until even the tiniest detail was clear. Every moment mattered if he was going to bring the right crew to work on his farm. Next day, a bunch of the boys got yanked to the farm again, and they just knew it meant they'd finally been accepted for the work after all. Only a handful actually survived the selection and made it through. Out of all the picks, 5 guys were over the moon. They crushed the interview and earned the spot. But not everyone got that win, because plenty of them walked into the interview and left without being hired. Naya burst into a rush of mad joy and wrapped Mercia in a hug. And yeah, Mercia wasn't exactly thrilled by all that sweetness. But she didn't push her away either. She just stood stiffly beside the newly elected worker. Even though everyone probably already knew each other, Isagi still made them introduce themselves, because that awkward first step is the kind that decides how things go from here in any company. Neha introduced herself and told them she used to help her grandfather with the fieldwork, and that practical experience made her stand out instantly, because when it comes to hiring, nothing counts more than having been there before. Isagi remembers how Naya once stepped in and absolutely crushed the fieldwork for them. She's the kind of person you can count on. And if things get messy, she'll jump in fast, push the right moves, and hand out advice that actually turns the tide. Rhodes turned out to be the beekeeper's son, so he strutted in with total confidence in his grit and raw strength. But here's the twist. He had zero experience with farming. And still, everyone trusted him to handle the physical work because that power was real. Nora busted her back on her dad's huge farm and then dove into the numbers and paperwork at her mom's general store shore. She wasn't the strongest muscle on the crew, but when it came to figuring things out, she crushed the small jobs and handled the office work like a pro. Ricardo was a hunter, and he dug in with brutal focus too, using the seeds he'd gotten from Asaji for his fieldwork, because out of every villager, Ricardo planted the most. Ricardo looks like he already knows the ropes on a farm, and Ragment, he's got the same level of farming experience as Ricardo. He couldn't even tell if that guy truly wanted to hire him or if it was just talk. Ragment can't wrap his head around why he got hired at all, because during the banquet he fired off a ton of rude words at Asaji. He leaned in and told him, "That's exactly why I need you on my team. I want to hire you because of this." Asaji figures Ragment will grill him with questions. No nerves, no embarrassment. Now the man narrows it down. He finally guesses what's going on, so he straight up asks to be allowed to question Asaji directly. That's his duty, after all, and everyone instantly respects how honest and clear the guy is. Mercy abroad rakes, hows, and sides. Then she turns around and begs the workers to help bring in the harvest. Naya asks what they'll need to harvest right now, and not a single person can even guess how brutal the work waiting for them really is. The girl grabbed the list and started calling out what they had to pick. Today, tomatoes, cucumbers, eggplants, bell peppers, and Chinese cabbage, because the farm was packed with even more vegetables and fruits waiting to be harvested. Before the girl could even finish rattling off the list, Naya cut in and asked if it wasn't just a little crazy to pull all that off in a single day. She explained that this was exactly why she needed the workers to step in and help them. Merciche reminded them that even after all that hard work, the salary was still shockingly high, and Sianasaji wouldn't stand in the way if the guys wanted to join the harvest with them, which made the whole deal insanely tempting. Mercia rested her hand on Nia's shoulder and beamed, like she was gently pushing them to give it everything, because this smile said the workers had no real choice in the matter. Every worker froze when the girl's aura hit them, then immediately scrambled to their stations, thinking, "This is no time to mess around, we better follow every rule and do the job right." Mercy strode up to Asaji, demanded he lock in on the workshop job, and told him to hand everything else to her, so he had no choice but to nod. Asagi respects her completely, and he won't treat her seriousness like it's anything less than important. Right here, the boys kicked off their days in the field, rolling up their sleeves and getting to work. Everyone dove into the job they'd been interviewed for, and Mercia broke it all down, step by step, showing the workers exactly how to use every tool they'd been handed. Everyone leaned in as the girl broke it down. And even Ragmon looked hooked. Mercy went step by step, teaching him how to wield a knife and pick cabbage. And he just stood there, gripping a cabbage in both hands like he was ready to try. As Naya hurried to her job, she spotted an apple tree heavy with juicy fruits. Her eyes lit up the moment she saw the apples. But picking one felt insanely awkward with Mercio standing just a few steps away. Because they grabbed their fruit and veggie share after work anyway. The guys bust their backs every day, and yeah, some of them figure out the job is brutal as hell, but for the ones with serious strength and stamina, it never turns into a problem. While the boys toiled in the fields, Asagi clocked in at the workshop, locked onto the produce because he finally realized the fruit wasn't fully ripe yet, and now he can pour way more time into it thanks to the new workers. Turns out strawberries, apples, and bananas are a total win, but to grow them on a massive farm, you've got to add even more varieties. So they survive better and fight off whatever the outside world throws at them. If this keeps going, they're going to have to expand the workshop, no question. Right as those thoughts were spinning in his head, the boy spotted Mercia out in the field, working hard. Asagi finally gets it. The girl's there to help him push through the housework, the workshop grind, and even the farm work. That girl always pushes herself way past the limit. Right here, Asagi suddenly snapped back to the time the girl had asked about grapes and the way she'd gotten so wrapped up in the talk that, for a moment, she drifted off into daydreams of big, sweet bunches. He knows growing grapes takes ages, but Asagi's not backing down. He's going to push through. Dead set on seeing every last bit of his new vegetable and fruit varieties through to the finish line. Is Sagi straining his back? Looks like the workshop grind is finally done. Those stacks of written sheets are piled up everywhere, and some of them are just dumped in chaotic heaps across every surface. He knows before long every single person is about to snap awake. Isagi clocks it, the workers got slammed on day one. And now he's wondering if he can somehow find a way to thank them for everything. All at once, a wild idea slams into his head. Asagi bolted for the cabinet, convinced he still had a little time. He was going to whip up a magic tool that would level up the farm's work conditions in a way that felt almost unstoppable. Locked inside the castle during his free time, the boy scribbled non-stop plans for magical instruments. His notes are just rough sketches, but once you stitch everything together, you can turn it into something that actually helps every single worker. And because materials are in short supply, some ideas never even get off the ground, just sketches and rough schematic drawings made it into the notes, so rebuilding them is going to be a nightmare. Isagi snaps his notebook shut then. Somehow, even he's shocked, because he spots a drawing of a tool, complete with a description that might unlock the invention of this very device. The work in the field ground to a halt. Niha shot her arms forward, stretching like every long day of farm work had drained her bone deep while all the boys could feel it too. Knowing just how brutal that grind was and how enormous the effort really took, all the boys crammed into the room, and nobody could even get a sense. How everyone was worn out from the field. Mercy then steps in to judge their work, and she makes it clear. They really busted their butts. Ragman finally admitted he hadn't been this exhausted in ages, and Rickard shot back that he'd busted his ass way harder today than ever on his own field, because nobody could have expected this kind of grind, but everyone could still feel how brutal it was. Rhodes, exhausted to his bones, still beamed because he and the boys finally hauled in a mountain of vegetables, and for all that hard work, they'd get solid pay, plus the fruit they'd gathered. Ragman stared at Nora, and it looked like she wasn't tired in the slightest. She dipped her head and let out a slow, steady exhale. Honestly, she looked completely worn out and snapped that she's only alive because feminine energy keeps her going. He couldn't quite make sense of what she was saying. Until Nora, fighting through her final breath, insisted she'd been doing this every single day. And the fake laughter that spilled out of her didn't sound happy at all. After all, that brutal grind never felt like it belonged in a little girl. He barged into the room, thanked the guys for their hard work, and told them to sit tight because he had one big thing to show them. The guys listened up, like their lives depended on it. Usagi lifts an object wrapped in cloth and tells his workers it's his gift. He grins like, "This will lift your days," and the guys overjoyed at the thought. Everyone's jaw dropped as they leaned in, staring hard at that still mysterious object. Asagi rips the cloth off and hands everyone the test mixer #1, and the inventor practically beams, so proud of his creation that he's dying to show off exactly how it works, right there in front of them. The guys couldn't figure out what this thing was even for. or why they needed it at all until Asagi grinned and said it was a magical tool and promised their jobs would be blown wide open once the results hit, completely reshaping how they saw fruits and vegetables. He starts blurting out that the bottom base hides a magic shard with no attributes. And if you channel the flow of magical power just right, the blade up top will start spinning. The workers just stare like he's speaking total nonsense. Mercia plopped chopped fruit onto a board, then tossed it straight into the mixer. The guy grabs some water, pours in magic power, and fires up the device for one mission it's about to accomplish. The mixers roared to life, grinding the vegetables to a frantic pulp. Naya's jaw dropped. People were really using those precious vegetables like that, and she couldn't stand the disrespect toward fruits and veggies. He heard nothing at all, even while her screams tore through the air. Isagi told Nia to take a breath and just stare at what finally spilled out. Because the idea that guy cooked up left the workers' faces frozen in shock. He pushed a dripping glass of fresh squeezed apple juice into the boy's hands. Every worker hit the brakes in shock when they saw Isagi whip up apple juice from only 2 ingredients, like he just pulled off something supernatural right in front of them. The guy asked the kids who wanted a drink, and the second the words left his mouth, every kid shot their hand up like they couldn't wait to tear into those juices. After busting their backs on the farm, they were absolutely wiped out. So when a new thirst-quenching drink finally came along, they couldn't wait to try it. Everyone loved the drink right away. Shiny, juicy apples with syrupy juice flashed into their heads, and those bright sun-kissed fruits instantly wrapped the kids in warm, sweet comfort. Nia, Rhodes, and Ricardo were absolutely thrilled that they could turn plain apples into a drink bursting with rich, sweet apple flavor and water, because the taste was nothing short of superb. Asaki winked at the boys, grinning like crazy because they actually loved the drink. Suddenly, Nor and Ragman popped up right behind the guy with empty glasses, and they were dying to try that amazing drink too. Asagi told them both to wait. He said he'd hit the sink first and washed the dishes before anything else. This time, he swapped water for milk to make the drink go down easier only. Now he had to rewrite the whole mix, and that's why it hit with a weird, unexpected flavor. So Asahi's about to whip up banana and strawberry milk. These new drinks are straight up unreal. Nobody could have even imagined something like this before, and right away Nora and Ragman dove in to try them. Nora caught the sweet, bright scent of strawberries, and the moment it hit her, joy exploded through her like sparks, lifting her up so hard it felt like she could float away right now. The boy's exhaustion vanished like magic, and Ragman cracked a smile as he took that drink. He could feel the strength flooding back into his bones. Nia finally admitted it. This was the first time she'd ever tasted juice that good. After that shot of pure juice, Ricardo felt tomorrow's fight in his bones, and he vowed to harvest even more than today, while every worker once again walked in convinced the working conditions were still at the very top. He beamed when the kids loved the juice, and suddenly all his hard work felt absolutely worth it. Nia spots the banana milk and practically salivates, begging to try it too. Isagi nods, but first he has to wash the bottle all over again. Mercy leans in, smiles, and listens to every word they say. She can't believe it. Isagi just clicked with the guy so fast, and Mercy didn't even expect better from that polished gentleman. Still, Isagi didn't get what they were talking about at first. Mercy figured the guy had a whole playbook bait them with sweet fruits so the workers never even think of running, and the girl clocked it too. That gentleman was deadly with carrot and stick tactics. The last side you never even bothered to consider. Honestly, it'd be awesome if the kids could at least squeeze in a little real fun while they help out on the farm. Mercia jumped on board instantly. She's got the exact same belief as her master, and yeah, the girl thinks the same way too. Suddenly, Asagi thrusts a glass of drink into Mercy's hands. He figured she was wiped out too, so he didn't waste his time. She still hadn't taken a sip of the drinks. He snatched a glass on purpose, leaned in, and begged them to taste it together before he dealt it out to everyone else. Asagi pulled out a totally wild drink idea-like. His imagination had no ceiling at all, and Mercius gave a soft, knowing smile. They clinked their glasses, then knocked back every last drop to toast the hell they just survived today. On this bright, sunny day, Mercius snaps that Asagi check and tidy the agricultural crops like he always does. And he doesn't even argue. He stays cool and steady with her orders, because she's the one who always helps him. A month and a half had blasted by since he and the boys kicked off the farm, and now, thanks to 5 workers in Mercia, their fields are finally running at full power, every bit of hard work paying off as the whole crew starts seeing the results for real. Their farm had ballooned into a whole kingdom stretching across everyday fields, a medicinal plant plantation, wheat fields, and an orchard because every single patch had to work to keep the place running. The company has blown up into this massive empire between all the factories, plantations, and endless fields. It's impossible to stay unimpressed. Isachi realizes that with a setup this massive, slipping around the problem is getting harder by the second. Then it hit him, an idea sparked in his mind like a flash of lightning. Yeah, she had to wait. He just needed a little time to turn his idea into reality. He swears he's got a killer idea. He's crafted refined copper into a copper horse, and this thing is built so real, it might as well be alive. That horse turned out to be a gallum, and he suddenly realized it was the perfect ride because when you have to roam and inspect huge areas, this transport saves you both time and effort. The girls thanked the gentleman from the bottom of their hearts because he'd helped her so much, and Isaki decided to build a second horse, too, so the two of them could ride around together. Turns out they didn't have enough materials to build that second horse. They had to ride from place to place on just one horse. Mercia froze in shock because that girl didn't even cling to the guy while riding, and the whole thing screamed awkwardness. Isagi told everyone to grip on tight, because if you rode without holding on to anything, you were basically asking to get hurt badly. Mercier's cheeks flared red. She yanked the guy's jacket with her own hand, and you could tell she was thrilled to be this close to a gentleman. He spun around out of nowhere and caught her purring right behind him. Then he blurted out, "Are you really doing that?" Mercia only glanced away and snapped that the guy must have made it up in his head. Then she leaned her head on Asagi's shoulder. Sie couldn't help but wonder, what kind of sound was that exactly? Riding the copper horse is way more convenient. It's blazingly fast, so the guys slashed the time they've wasted, trudging around on foot, checking everything. Asaki and Mercia rolled up to Rhodes, and Mercia jumped straight into the work, toiling on the site alongside the golems. He definitely didn't see the boys coming, but he still greeted them with a loud good morning, and Rhodes every single time handles his job perfectly, so there's not a shred of doubt. He said he was just there to check the farm, straighten things out, and begged Rhodes not to worry. Rhodes got it and stepped back, letting him walk right up to one of the greenhouses. He realizes Permino House keeps its cooler, heats up perfectly, it's sealed in a translucent film, and magical gear inside takes control of the temperature. He figures it's worth choking the plant's growth rate, letting them creep along slowly, because even the best fruits and vegetables depend on hitting that perfect growth base. Eats carefully scans every bush, then scrutinizes the fruits one by one, like his life depends on it. Mercier can't help but realize this guy is seriously incredible. But it turned out Asaki heard nothing until he asked the girl, and she snapped, "I didn't say anything," then spun away like that was the end of it. She stared out the window and realized that building a massive farm in their village wasn't something anyone could pull off, so she couldn't help but marvel at her master. Truly incredible. Someone worth following as an example. Once he finally finished checking everything, he snapped that they had to head to the orchard, because every single field on the farm needed a full, careful inspection. Pronto. To spot anything weird going on with the way the vegetables and fruits were growing before it turned into a disaster. Suddenly, Niha charges up to Asagi and yells that the orchard is in trouble, breathless and panicking, and just that one shout screams that this is an emergency. The girl didn't waste a word. She grabbed the lead and sprinted them along, because explaining can wait when every single second matters, and you can't just delay news like this. The boys stormed into the orchard and found every fruit wrecked and ruined. Watermelon rinds lay scattered across the field, while the pink pulp was splattered in torn chunks almost everywhere. Isagi and Mercia stared in terror at what was happening right in front of them. They just couldn't wrap their heads around how something like that even happened, because stuff like this only shows up in the most rare, unbelievable situations, and you can count those on one hand. The fruit looked like a savage storm had wrecked them, sweeping them across the field, then hurling them onto the ground so hard they exploded into shards. But yeah, that didn't feel like any natural disaster. Isagi leans in and asks Ni, "Did this happen yesterday too?" She snaps her head side to side. No, nothing like that ever happened. Outside, the sky is still crystal clear. No sign of rain, no way a storm should have shown up, and it's been forever. She told him that after work, everything looked just like normal. But then morning hit, and the world turned brutal. Naya could barely hold back her tears. She couldn't even accept that she was the one who let something this terrible slip through. The boy leaned in and asked if there was any more rotten fruit, and the girl snapped back that the stink only lived in this spot yet. That didn't save Naya at all, because the watermelon field was under her watch. The boy let out a huge breath of relief because it hit him fast. He'd gotten off lucky. Only the watermelons had gone bad, and if any other fields had been hit, the farm would have been wrecked for good, leaving a repair job that would take ages to fix. Naya clenched her fists, folding her hands tight in front of her. She's trembling from head to toe, crying her heart out and begging the guy for forgiveness, because she never saw a catastrophe this huge coming in the field. And now guilt crushes her for not watching the harvest more closely. You watched the girl's face tighten, like she was terrified the harvest wouldn't go her way. Mercy finally steadied her and insisted none of this was her fault. Then Asagi backed it up, saying the field can't be guarded even when night falls. First, Asagi went all in on gathering every damaged thing he could find, and the girls instantly jumped in to help. Spoiled fruits sit in wooden boxes, and insects swarm overhead, buzzing like they own the place. Asagi stares at it all, completely baffled, and can't stop asking himself how this mess even happened. Suddenly, the guy's eyes snapped to claw marks carved into one of the fruits. Not far from the field, he stumbled on signs of wild animals. And that discovery practically screamed why that massive harvest went bad. Now it all clicks. This wasn't some human at all. Mercy swears she caught a faint whiff of wild animals, and suddenly the boys see it clear as day. The culprit. Suddenly, Naya snaps into action, yanks their attention away, and calls them over because she's uncovered something that can confirm, with real accuracy, the guy's suspicions about the wild animal's guilt. Turns out the girl stumbled onto a black tuft of wool and froze. He tossed out the idea it could be a black wolf, and honestly, those beasts are trouble on legs because they're wild, they hunt and grab their own food, no help needed. Nayu stared in shock. This boy figured it out just by tapping that wool, and he bragged he could read material info by calculation. Then Asagi skillfully tore apart the exact piece the girl uncovered. Mercia figured the wild animals had sniffed out that sweet watermelon scent and slipped down from the mountains under cover of night. And Naya can't shake the fear it could all happen again today. Mercy swore this horror would hit again like hungry bears that once tasted human flesh. They'll come back and tear their lives apart. And the way she laid it out was downright chilling, yet painfully believable. Naya's fear spikes even harder when she hears this, and she can't stop asking what they're supposed to do next, because wild animals are way too dangerous and handing the harvest out for free would wreck the farm's money and crush the workers who rely on it. Everyone knows the enemy is a slippery, hard-hitting monster, so don't try to take him on out in the open farm fields. The guy pitches the idea of doing the performance from the watermelon field, right where the fruit got smashed to pieces. The boy begged Nay to summon Ragment, and to call Ricardo to guard the farm, then he made it clear they didn't have to gamble their lives for it. She obeyed without hesitation and bolted off at full speed the second she could. The guy snapped his order. Glems, pause your work, because right now, the farm is all that matters. He and Mercy have to hammer out a solid plan fast, because their future together hangs on it. The boy swung onto his horse and rode after the wild animal tracks, charging straight into the forest. Mercy bolted onto her horse and declared she was going with the master no matter what, because she could feel Asagi might need backup any second. It's like he promised, I'm gonna crank up my speed a bit, so the girl better grip on tight. Mercia didn't hesitate one bit. She and the others were dead set on uncovering why the watermelon field's fruit had turned bad. The boys are already tearing through the forest, and the boy grabs the girl's attention. Are these tracks the same ones we found in the watermelon field? Because this has to be dead on, or his farm guests could end up getting the wrong idea. The girl nodded and said the truth. Those tracks kept vanishing deeper and deeper into the forest, and the air even carried a faint scent of animals. It all sealed the case that wild creatures were the ones wrecking the harvest. And just like that, Mercia spots it right beside them. A whole pack of wild beasts is sprinting full speed. Out of nowhere, they were so close the boys couldn't even process it. There they were, strolling almost side by side. In the middle of the chaos, the boys suddenly found themselves boxed in by wild animals. Turned out those beasts were shadow wolves, and the guy was dead right. Because when he brushed that tuft of wool the worker accidentally spotted out in the field, everything clicked. Asagi realizes it a second too. Demiburin Tumin. The boy leans in and asks Mercier, can you handle the shadow wolf? But the girl's not fully convinced still. She's brimming with confidence, and she's ready to stand her ground for her master. Here, Asagi realizes this enemy is so brutal, it even Mercy can't predict a win. And he knows that if he helps, their chances skyrocket. But the Black Wolves won't let it happen. He slowly slips his hand out of the glove. Mercia bursts in front of the guy, declaring she'll hold him off, then tells him that, right this second, he has to bolt. And the girl makes one insanely bold choice. Isagi's jaw dropped at what the girl blurted out, because none of this felt real. He never expected Mercia to gamble that hard, risking being left alone in the forest with wild animals. Rage twisted his face as he snarled that he'd never be able to leave her and slip away. He knows it's irrational, but since he's the only guy left, he refuses to turn his back on Mercy. Asagi snaps that he has no right to be doing this, grabs the girl by the shoulders, and tells her she still backed him even after he got kicked out of the Imperial Castle. Asagi snaps that even if trouble comes crashing back in again, it doesn't give him an excuse to abandon her. Because in his mind, the only way they survive these hellish moments is by staying close, as long as Mercia is right there with him. And they're way stronger together. Mercio's heart got hit like lightning the moment he heard those words. That gut-wrenching moment got ripped apart by the wolf's wicked laughter, and the boys snapped their heads toward the sound, still clueless about where that wild beast was hiding. One of the shadow wolves snapped to itself, thinking, "We're not here to argue, we don't get time for that." And it raged that humans were taking way too much freedom, wasting precious time like it meant nothing. The boy suddenly caught on this wolf wasn't just talking. It was smart enough to understand them too. That shock hit hard, but honestly, it felt way too perfectly wild and magical to be anything else. Asagi figured the wolf might just be toying with them if it wasn't really set on attacking, then they still had a shot to strike a deal. And Asagi even had a plan that could save them from ever having to use force. Isaki snaps, demanding a deal with the wolf, and Mercia's jaw drops at the audacity. The girl can't believe the master would risk everything, marching up to the wolf with some kind of bargain, fully aware he could be beaten. The wolf looked him dead in the eyes, stunned, and demanded again. Was he really trying to strike a deal with them, the monsters? Nobody had ever dared to try. Then, without warning, an unusually brave man stepped forward toward the wild beast. He confirms it and flashes a quick promise this chat will be short, and it'll pay off. Then the wolf steps right up, eyes locked on the deal, and finally lets the guy try to talk. He closes the distance until his mouth is right in front of the guy. He growls in a voice that chills your bones. If boredom hits, he'll make Asage fall in. Even hearing it in a moment like this, there's no way anyone can back down. The guy gripped that glove like it was the only thing holding him together. He corners the wolf and demands whether they chowed down on the watermelons from his farm last night. Now the wolf finally knows those juicy treasures are called watermelons, and he's already planning to sneak down for his own bite tonight. He warned him. If that wolf keeps chowing down on watermelons, there won't be a single one left. But if that goes down, the wolf won't stop. He'll hunt for more. Certain the fruits and berries will bounce back and get replaced for him. The guy threw his hands up and admitted, with a grim sorry, that only they know how to grow. These watermelons and the wolves circling the guys went dead silent, especially the wolf running the negotiations, who never saw that bombshell coming. Rage flared in the wolf's eyes as it snapped at the boy, demanding to know what he'd demand instead, because the wolf was convinced Asagi wanted the wolves gone the moment the watermelons vanished, and that meant their food could disappear in the blink of an eye. He straight up insists, nope, none of that is true. He's about to drop off watermelons and other fresh veggies and fruits to the wolves. But don't miss this. He's already gearing up to demand something back. The wolves looked absolutely hooked-like. They couldn't get enough of those watermelons because they kept standing there, quietly listening to the guy, and every condition he laid out, calm as could be. So Asagi makes a trade. He wants the wolves to stand watch over his farm. Rage burst in the wolf's chest as he snapped and shouted that the boy was about to turn them into his guard dogs, because he never expected the kid to treat him and his pack like that, and he absolutely didn't accept it. The wolf snapped into a fighting stance, ready to launch and pounce the second it saw its opening. Mercy's guts screamed that everything was going off the rails, and her worry for her master hit like a blade, because one wrong word could seal their fate and cut off any chance to return to their village farm. Asagi just shrugged and said it all comes down to how the wolf sees it. He explains that, to a wolf's eyes, humans look like easy livestock, just animals that keep feeding it with delicious food. Every guy's judgment clicked into place dead logical because they trusted the wolf's words, and the wolf couldn't believe how sharp their thinking was. The guy told them that on his farm, besides watermelons, he had tons of other mouth-watering food, and just like that, the wolves finally cooled off, perked up, and latched onto the deal. The boy demands to know what the wolf decided, and the wild animals snap with pure determination, because they want one permanent home where they can feed for good. A pitch-black night crashed down, swallowing everything in eerie silence. Right now, the farm is locked and loaded for defense. Everyone's posted on the border with weapons and farm tools in hand, ready to fight tooth and nail to protect it. Suddenly, Nia spots a tiny glimmer of light out in the distance. The boys realized it was Mercy and Asagi who'd come back, and when they saw him safe and sound after all that time, pure relief hit them like a wave. The boy begged for forgiveness for the delay, then the golem's horse died on them, so they rode on without it. Yet somehow they still slipped into the village safe and sound, and Marcia just stayed quiet. Naya's stomach dropped, terrified the boys might have gotten seriously hurt. The guy said, "Good news, everything worked out," and everyone cheered because the people who showed up were alive and okay, but the real worry still hung in the air over Asagi and Mercia. The girl can't stop wondering if those boys managed to tame the black wolves. Honestly, he paused for a second and begged him to listen calmly. For once, and right before he could even start, someone blurted out, "Can we go out?" The guy who was ordered to stay quiet was right on the edge of spilling the whole story to the others. And trust me, This moment hit hard, because not everyone gets to see how an ordinary person and a wild animal can truly connect and cooperate. A black ear suddenly popped up right beside the guy's boot. A few seconds later, a massive shadowy wolf's head burst out, and the guards still standing at the farm instantly froze in terror, because nobody ever thought they'd face that monster this close. The boy shrieked that a monster was lurking inside Isagi's shadow. Isagi shot his hand up and told the boys to calm down because they needed a second to actually hear that guy out, process the info, and stop panicking about the guests. Long ago, deep in the forest, a wolf stepped up and offered a guy the chance to strike a deal. The wolf snarled that if the boy couldn't fill its hunger, the whole deal would be wiped out on the spot, yet Isagi still nodded and agreed. He's so sure of himself that he swears his farm beats everyone else, both in how much it grows and how good it tastes. That wolf grinned like he'd struck gold. Now he could bet his life the pack would never run out of food. Ragnant didn't expect someone that amazing to be so close to the village, and Ricardo couldn't believe it. He stepped in and offered that terrifying monster a deal, which is something most people just can't do. Asaki finally lets out a breath no more attacks, so he can rest easy, and the guys get it. Go back to work without a fight, because this move is all for the farm and the people who keep it alive. Then, out of the shadows, his voice hits, and the guy demands, "So, is it finally time to get out?" Isagi gives the go-ahead, and in the blink of an eye, a shadow monster crawls out of his shadow. The monster violently shakes its fur like it's ripping off the last traces of fear. Right away, he pushes for them to go over the duties again, because now all the rules and conditions will be laid out in front of every employee, so nobody's left in the dark about what's going on. Isagi tells him the wolves are supposed to guard the farm, mostly after dark, so the wolf shrugs it off and barges in like, "Cool, then feed me fruits and veggies." The bargain's easy, but it looks like more rules are about to get nailed down. He stared at the harvest like, how much did we really bring in? Mercia demanded that everyone hand us to her, fully sure she could talk to the wolf for a moment, lay out the details cleanly, and convince him to seal the deal. The girl promised they'd bring him food every single day until he was stuffed, and every 5 days she'd set out enough to feed the whole pack. The wolf figured it was a steal, so he nodded and agreed on the spot. Then he couldn't stop wondering how far people had pushed agriculture. If they could keep a huge pile of food coming every 5 days. He decided to lay out the rules from the start, and the wolf snapped back so duties weren't enough. Now there were rules too. Then the guy made it clear this was the deal, so everyone could live side by side without constant friction. The wolf finally settled in and listened like a calm storm. Then the guy laid down his rules. Don't attack people. The ring thing. Don't touch the farm's harvest without permission. Don't ruin a thing and get the other workers out of the way of the monsters too. The wolf slammed his paw down and cut the boys' words off mid-sentence. He told them their job is just to guard the farm, and he doesn't care about anyone else, while the wolf's mood swings hard, like it always does with wild beasts. Asagi snapped back that it's nothing like that. No workers, no harvesto. He's trying to get the wolf to see them as part of the farm, because that's the only explanation that actually makes sense for why they'd protect the other workers too. The wolf finally admits there's real truth in the boy's words, but he refuses to promise he can save everyone. Because even with all his brute strength, speed, and sheer discipline, he's still not omnipotent and power has its limits. Still, this is more than enough for Isagi. The wolf hissed through clenched teeth, furious at what it saw. He crouched to the ground and laid out the whole plan to his pack, barking orders for every member to step out one last time, lock in the deal's details, and then get to work. Right from the chief wolf's shadow, the other wolves burst out, dropped down in front of him, and hung on every word as he issued the order. No one argued because every single one of them was fully satisfied with the deal. The wolf demanded obedience to the rules and pushed him to handle his duties. Then the guy realized sliding through the shadows was pure cheat code convenience, the exact kind of advantage a powerful, agile beast lives for. Mercier keeps thinking about heading to the village and breaking the whole situation to her father and the villagers, just like that polite boy asked her to do. Now all that's left is to pass the news to everyone else. Then they can finally get to work. The wolf named it Sagi. He blurted out whether, since they were headed for the village right now, the wolves could really expect watermelons because, yeah, it was a perfectly sensible ask, based on every part of the deal both sides had hammered out. Still, he nodded and agreed, then swore he'd lead the wolves straight to the watermelon field right now. Isagi picked every watermelon one by one, zeroing in on the sweetest ones. He begged them to hold off for just a minute before he sliced into the fruit. Once the wolves took over guarding the plantation, real peace finally swept in. No more raids threatening the farms or trashing the harvest, and the wolves didn't have to scramble anymore for food. Nearly 30 black wolves got drafted into the guard, and the losses deer and boars caused were paid back in full. Then the cubs kept running around the farm, and Mercia gently asked them to knock it off with a smile. Mercia strode through the city with the wolf pack's leader, and Kokoro watched the wolves sprawled along the roads, soaking up the moment as if they'd always belonged there, confused. The wolf couldn't wrap its head around how those once stomping, stern beasts ended up so obedient so fast. The wolf swears that it, along with demons, can live in peace with nature, and that the only thing that matters is humans learning to ignore their presence. Mercy just smiled, because hearing the wolf argue about what it even means to exist among people had her cracking up. Thanks to the wolf, Azagi gets breathing room, more time to dig into research, push his science harder, and breed fresh new fruit and vegetable varieties. Because now he doesn't have to stress about guarding the farm anymore. He stormed down to the basement with a notebook clutched in his hands. Turns out the basement was really just a storage room packed with dried herbs, fresh greens, and even ore, and all of it was there so he could study everything in peace. Isagi didn't just want better harvests, he craved perfection, so he built an underground experimental farm. First thing right now? He's going to scoop up hard data, because every scrap of it will fuel his next research. Isagi powers his underground farm with a magical sunlight collector, creating a perfect light reproduction inside his lab so he never has to stress about lighting at all. Leftover seeds don't just sit there. They sprout into wild, unpredictable monsters. And down in the underground experimental farm, they grow the crops researchers are actively testing. Oak's plants turned out to be a mess, never steady in growth, never reliable in nutrition. Broccoli hogged the nutrients and left the soil ruined. That's when the guy finally realized those crops weren't ready for the farm yet. Isagi swore he'd push even farther, so he called Mercia and made sure she wasn't anywhere nearby, because he didn't want her catching a whiff of what he was about to do for her. This was huge. He slapped the wall with his palm and it vanished on contact like it was never solid at all. From the ceiling, heavy grape bunches dangled beside carved leafwork, and every single berry gleamed like a pearly bead, catching and flashing the light as if it were alive. The grapes looked so perfect they might have been hand-painted, like an oil painting that you could actually taste. He couldn't stop wondering what it would taste like. The group took one bite and winced at how brutally sour it tasted, because getting a perfect crop isn't instant. Sometimes it drags on for weeks, and with seeds all different sizes, eating them is a whole struggle. The boy realized juggling fertility and taste was brutally hard, and even Isagi started wondering if mass production was worth quitting. Then Isagi snaps back to Mercia's curious smile from their chat about grapes and realizes he can't quit now. He has to keep pushing, just so he can thank her for everything. He realizes Mercia has done more than enough for them, so he steps up with pure gratitude and hands over the most delicious grapes, because he knows that the chosen culture will carry out his plan exactly the way he meant it. Right then, Isagi snapped his head up and heard a voice echoing through the laboratory. He bolted out in a split second, and the wall behind him instantly looked totally normal again. Isagi poked his head up from behind the plant stand and spotted Mercia. She looked dead certain the gentleman was in the basement, like she could pinpoint exactly where he was and what he was doing, because they'd known each other way too long. Mercy shot Isagi a mean glare and snapped that he'd been working way too much lately. While Isagi watched, the girl realized he'd been stuck in the workshop for the past 2 weeks. Turns out the guy doesn't even realize how fast time is tearing by. Mercia let out a shaky breath, her eyes softening into pure pity. The girl warned him, "If you keep charging ahead like this, you're going to get yourself sick." Isagi stared at the idea of taking a whole day off, but the guy's totally clueless about what to do on weekends. Isagi looks like he hasn't had a real break in ages. Or maybe he's never rested at all. So yeah, he's gonna need some mercy here too. Mercy kept on with her picnic because today's weather was perfect, and that gorgeous flower garden nearby begged her to enjoy herself. Plus, her know-how always came in clutch for moments like this. He was totally on board with the plan, so he pushed hard that they should start cooking right now, because they had to make it to the picnic today with time to spare. Turns out Mercier had everything ready to go. She grabbed the basket of food and flashed it at the gentleman. He told him you thought it was awesome, and he insisted he should rope in the other employees until you find out Mercy already did. The rest of the guys will come running as soon as they're done with their work. The guy shot the girl a huge thank you for coordinating everything like a pro. Right as the guy shut the door and stepped outside, his shadow split open, and the shadow being crawled out, showing up out of nowhere like always, and even scaring the people standing right there. The boy stared, stunned that the wolf had somehow slipped into his shadow, then panicked hard, because the beast was right there, inches away. The wolf even grinned and said he was a farm employee who wanted to join the picnic too. The boy couldn't believe it. Gakuro, the wolf, was into the picnic too. So when the boy stared, the wolf just glanced off like, "Yep, I want it. Clearly craving to go with the boys, but refusing to say another word about why. Sunlight blazes outside, flooding everything in warm golden glare. Mercia, Isagi, and Kokoro grabbed their stuff and went on a picnic. Then they sprinted through the city, vanished into the forest, crossed the meadows, and finally burst into a flower garden, staring out at all the endless ground they'd just conquered. As soon as the boy stepped into the garden, his breath caught those endless fields of flowers looked unreal, perfectly pristine, and one lone tree kept shedding petals over him like it was putting on a show just for his eyes. The girl blurted out that they'd already reached their destination. There were so many flowers jammed together that you couldn't name them all, and that's when he finally realized, right there, that a breathtaking garden hid near the village this whole time, packed with endless blooms that only made the beauty hit even harder. Isaki started inspecting the flowers up close, like he was hunting for clues, and the girl watched him in quiet, calm relief he'd finally snagged a day off just to enjoy himself. He didn't have a clue that right by the village sat a garden so breathtaking it felt unreal. The guy leaned in, asking about specific flowers, and Mercia lit up. She already knew every bloom in this garden and proudly named each one he wanted to hear. Isaki couldn't help but stare. This girl knew a mountain of flowers, while he only understood what they were made of, and somehow that still didn't feel like it was enough to let him fully enjoy such a perfect day in a world this beautiful. The guy asked the girl if he could pick some of those flowers, and Mercia said sure, only it still didn't make sense why he needed them right this moment. He taps into magic, and those petals explode into a brand new flower, blazing a totally different color. Mercia noticed it instantly. The Hansanya petals had already turned blue even though they'd been pure white only seconds ago. He told us he used alchemy to reshape the flower's elemental gradients. He thrusts the tweaked flower into the girl's hands and tells her he's handing it to her. Then it hits you, clear as day, why he had to steal it from the garden in the first place. Mercy never saw a gift like that coming, and it left her cheeks burning. The boy just stood there, holding the flowers out as if he couldn't let go. And the wolf didn't even bother. He sprawled down and knocked out cold in the sweet-smelling blossoms. The moment he realized the truth hit him like lightning. He threw out an apology, then replayed everything in his head. He hadn't meant to hand Mercy a flower out of nowhere, and the idea felt reckless and stupid, like he'd never wanted to show kindness that way. The boy's hand drops the flower, and Asaji's stomach knots. She worries she's annoying Mercia, and it crushes her, because Mercia does so much for him. Yet she never seems to get time for herself. Mercy snatched the flower straight from the boy's hands, then smiled and told him he didn't annoy her one bit. Getting such a surprise gift from Asagi hit her like a burst of joy, and even without a clear reason, the whole moment simply thrilled her. The girl never even realizes the guy already knows one key fact, because Mercio is the one who's genuinely shocked, since Hansen's gift to the opposite sex carries a special meaning, and the guy is stunned since he has no idea what that meaning even is. He demanded to know what that gesture even meant. She turned away, smiled like she was hiding gold, and whispered, "It's a secret." Then she lifted her index finger to her mouth, clear as day that this one wasn't for everyone. Asagi freezes, a little scared, and begs for the flower. Back, but Mercy smirks and shuts him down, saying it's hers now, because it was Asagi who handed it to her. She spun around, chasing the sweet, spellbinding scent pouring from that flower. That sweet, almost too intimate moment got ripped apart when the wolf jolted awake from a deep sleep. Kokoro's stomach growled, so he pushed them to start eating right away because they'd been at the garden for ages, and that table still wasn't even set. The boys dropped a blanket on the ground beneath a tree. Mercia popped open the basket and announced they'd got sandwiches today. And the girl hustled hard to make sure Isagi didn't even have to worry about the picnic. Once Asagi and Kokoro peeked into the basket, their faces went white with shock. The basket brims with a crazy variety of sandwiches, every flavor and type you can imagine. And that wolf's hunger roared louder than ever as he demanded, "Now, give me my share." He grinned and told him, "I'll slice you a piece right now." The sandwich got sliced in half, and you could see every single layer of filling lay bare in the cross-section like a juicy masterpiece. The boys tore into those delicious sandwiches like they hadn't eaten in days. Juicy, thick ham hit first, then crisp lettuce and juicy tomatoes followed, sweet as fruit, snapped with the perfect sour kick, and somehow left me stunned. He was totally blown away by how insanely delicious the vegetables growing on their farm were. Mercia also clocked that the vegetables the gentleman grew had a totally unique flavor, and the more you think about it, the more those two details click together perfectly. Isagi locked eyes with Mercia's sandwich, and when he saw those thick tomatoes and the same cabbage piled together, his taste buds practically started salivating, while Kokoro didn't care one bit about the whole combo. That wolf leaned in and asked if the boys had any ready-made watermelon sandwiches, while Isagi just stared like, seriously? Who even eats watermelon in a sandwich? He should have been eaten straight, plain as it comes. Asagi can't believe that this combo feels totally weird to him. Turns out there are even watermelon sandwiches, and Mercia went out of her way to make them. The guys dug into sweet watermelon and yogurt sandwiches, and they also went for the classic salted watermelon with a cheese salad. To my shock, it tasted insanely good. Mercia leaned in and asked Mr. Asagi if he wanted to try these sandwiches, and the guy practically lit up while the wolf was already tearing into treats, face first with his favorite watermelon. He took a bite of the sandwich, and boom cool, refreshing watermelon sweetness hit hard. Then the yogurt's tang snapped it into place, and suddenly he couldn't believe it. Watermelon could be downright delicious right there in a sandwich. Isagi's never been into the capital's sugary stuff, but this watermelon sandwich hits him with a sweet and salty punch that feels like a win. So, yeah, Mercy's hard work totally paid off, because she can turn any fruit into pure delicious magic. The boy grinned and thanked Mercia for the treat, saying it was unbelievably tasty while the wolf was already out cold, smacking his lips in his sleep after that meal. Kukro realized the only reason it tasted so damn delicious was that sweet watermelon. Asagi said it plain, only a merciless mind can slice watermelon into pure perfection. And honestly, nothing else even comes close. The moment she heard those words, joy exploded in her chest. He tore into his second sandwich with that classic familiar bite, and she watched him the whole time grinning like she knew exactly what was coming. The boys sprawled under the tree like they had nothing to fear, soaking up the calm and grinning, because right now this moment felt perfectly safe. Suddenly, a girl in the field jolts her hand up and yells that everyone's already started eating, while the workers Marcia assigned have already crushed their tasks and sprinted off to finally rest. Turns out it was Naya plus every other guy too. They'd barely clocked out when hunger hit. And now they were rushing to hook up with Asagi and Mercia because they were dying to get their hands on the sandwiches Mercia just made. The boy was thrilled because the other boys had already crushed all the work, but Mercia was nowhere near done. She snapped that they should have been buried under even more tasks, while the girl just wanted a little extra time alone with the master. The guy asked her what she meant, and the second she heard him, she lit up with a smile, insisted nothing was wrong, and suggested they spread out more. Every guy slid in with the vacationers, and the whole crew lit up finally getting a real day off together. They were bursting with joy. Cogmus leans in and says, "Good morning." And this girl, straight out of some amazing chamber of commerce, bounces right back with a bright smile. Everyone else answers too, and she's always warm and friendly with traders and customers alike. A total joy to work with. Asagi clocked her buying the harvest like clockwork. Koni nodded it was the same, and thanked the boy. Then the boy finded straight at the pile and said, "That's ours." Because this time they'd stacked a shockingly huge harvest. Kane stared at the mountains of boxes and barrels packed with goods, and joy burst out of her as she rushed to thank Asagi, because now she had even more stuff to sell at the markets. Konya barked the order to her boys, and they sprang into action. Every cart got stuffed with goods until it was stacked clear to the top. Suddenly, the girl's face flipped with a shock, and Asagi, eyes sharp, blurted out what happened. Konya got a letter from Mercia. Turns out the guards were demons, and the sender swore it was true. Asagi chimed in, saying they were shadow and black wolves. And when the guy asked if they should be called out, the girl didn't even hesitate. Asagi flicked his hand and beckoned one of the shadow wolves closer, and Konya lit up at how adorable it was. Then she remembered one thing. Wild animals can turn unpredictable in a heartbeat. She asked the guy if she could touch a wolf, and he told her, "If the wolf lets you, you're good to go." The moment the girl reached up and touched the top of the wolf's head, the hat ripped clean off her head and flew away instantly. The wolf yanked the hat from its mouth and leapt a mile away from the girl, then glanced back at her with the hat still clamped between his teeth, because once he found a new toy, he wasn't about to let it go that easily. The girl clutched her head because her favorite hat was there. Then she bolted straight at the wolf like a streak of lightning, yelling that he'd better give it back. Only the wolf hadn't expected her to move that fast. And still, he had no intention of backing down. She couldn't reach the wolf in time. So she face-planted the ground instead, and later she demanded where that black wolf vanished, only to hear, from the shadows, the cold truth. It wouldn't let itself be captured so easily. Kokuro lunges out of the boy's shadow and blurts an apology to the girl, hat clenched between his teeth. Then Konya rockets onto the wolf and screams that she finally caught him. As the girl grips the thick fur with both hands, Kokuro froze in place while Konya kept shrieking at him to hand over the hat, yet the wolf only went along with the deal if the girl finally shut up and stopped screaming in his ear. Suddenly, Asagi leaned in and asked Konya to crank up their trade volume about 1.5 times what they had now, and Konya immediately nodded, calling it a solid deal. With all the carts and assigned spots, there's no way to make it work right now, So the girl figures the guy's sitting on a mountain of harvested goods because they've grown so many fruits and vegetables that there's literally nowhere left to store them. Then she blurted out, "Let's head to the city and sell all this extra fruit and veggies." The boy finally heard the story for the first time. Konya told him about a city called Melon, just a single day's journey away, and Asaji's memory snapped back to the place where he and Marcia had stopped on their way to the village. Melon is the closest town to this village, and it's buzzing with life. If the guys grab a spot at the free market and pay up, they'll be able to trade without any limits. This way, Asaji can finally sell her fruits, and the girl is convinced that if they're pulled straight from Asaji's farm, those fruits and veggies will fly off the shelves, because his harvest always comes out top tier. Mercio nearly fell over when he heard it. Turns out the guy was actually planning to sell the fruits from his stock. The girl loved the idea, and she was already plotting to grab a few more supplies for the house. Naya wasn't about to miss the city either. She begged to tag along, and Mercia shot back, "Why do you want to go?" Turns out Naya just had to make everyone taste how insanely delicious the harvest was on their farm, and honestly, only she could pull off that kind of food hype. With a grin, the guy asked the girl what the real reason was for heading into the city, and Nay blurted out that she worked her tail off and just wanted to squeeze in some fun in the city sometimes. Then it hit her a second later what she'd just admitted. Isaji set her up, and the guy finally caught on that the girl had laid out her real intentions. Maybe she wanted a slick ad for Isaji's harvest, but that wasn't the real mission. Mercy said they weren't heading there to play. They were going for business, not fun. But Nia waved it off and said it didn't matter, because all she wanted was to get out of the village. In the end, both girls locked eyes with the guy, begging him to choose, and when he finally said Nate could go too, one girl bolted off at once to grab her things. Mercia pushed Asaji to take the girl on the trip since they were childhood friends, but he shot that down fast, saying he and Mercia would be stuck handling sales, while Nia would be stuck serving customers. Mercia nodded, promising she'd do her best while Nia handled the customers. Then Nia bolted over to the guys, ready to hit the road in a crop shirt and shorts. Mercia clocked it instantly. The girl had changed for real. Nia spilled that these weren't just any clothes, they were for hitting the city. Her excitement was through the roof, and it was clear she'd been waiting forever for this exact moment. Nia leaned in and asked Mercier why she didn't dress up for once, and Mercier shrugged. She was stuck working and she just didn't have the time, no matter how badly she wanted to. Nia blurted that it was honestly kind of boring and then admitted she'd love to see Mercia in something nicer more often. Because yeah, the girl is beautiful off the clock, she just never seems to have the time. Mercia snapped at Asagi to hurry, because if they left right now, they could still make it back before nightfall, so Asagi nodded and agreed anyway. The guy explained that with the golem horses, they'd reach the spot in just 3 hours. Mercia instantly remembered that last ride on the golem horses with the guy, and the girl's cheeks flared red as she panicked, trying to cover it with her palm. Then memories of how she'd had to ride, pressed close to him, slammed into her mind like lightning. Turned out there were 3 horses, perfect, since everyone needed one. Isagi had just the right stuff to craft speed-boosting ways so they could move faster and waste no time. And Naya? She was over the moon. She finally snagged her own golem too. Turns out the guy had just gotten fresh materials too, copper and everything, so he could finally build that column. And Asagi couldn't help but grin at how perfect the timing was. Then he clocked Mercy's awful mood and pressed her for answers. Mercy was crushed, because she feared she'd be shoved back onto that same horse with him again, trapped close to each other like it was doomed to repeat. Mercia didn't even blink. She swung into the saddle and barked orders to get ready to ride out, and the boy figured it was because she didn't like how the horse looked. Honestly, trying to read Asagi's mind for what Mercia really felt was a nightmare sometimes. The boys kicked off immediately, charging across those endless fields like it was a race for survival. And Naya couldn't stop grinning. She'd been invited along and even handed her own horse, so now she could finally live the freedom she'd been dreaming about for ages. Naya blurted out that she finally saw the city, and Isagi's face lit up like crazy. The guys could already spot the roofs of the houses peeking over that tough, steady wall. The boys roll into the city through a giant arch while a whole flood of people streams after them. Then Mercia spring jumps off her horse and pushes forward on foot, and they end up trekking a long, long way. The boys strolled through Milan, and the streets were packed, people everywhere, plus magical creatures weaving through the crowd. Naya couldn't stop staring at almost every single inhabitant. And Asagi just shook his head, realizing this city was insanely massive. The boys waited on the road toward those giant arches that seemed to point straight to the heart of the city, and right in front of them, endless merchants crowded in, ready to sell their goods. Naya figured these guys were new to the city. Then Asagi dropped a bombshell. He'd already been to Milan, but last time, he didn't get to see a single landmark. He was there for business, so he just swapped maps and moved on. Naya was over the moon that today the boys could finally slow down, look everywhere, and savor the moment, yet Iside still had to nod along. Because now they'd roam the city freely and really dive into trading like they meant it. But before anything else, the boys have to hawk their supplies and rake in some cash. And Neha is desperate to jump in and help Asagi and Mercia until Mercia and Asagi suddenly freeze, spotting something odd in the crowd. Mercy stepped into that icy place, and the second she spotted the jewelry behind the glass, she froze. Those gems flashed in the sunlight like they were calling her name, and the dainty chains dangling around them looked so light, so graceful, it felt unreal. Isagi's mind snapped back to that moment. The girl was totally locked in on one specific thing, so he leaned over and asked Mercia if she liked it, but she instantly balked, shaking her head hard and insisting it wasn't true at all. He clocks what Mercia likes, and he also sees right through how badly that girl tries to hide her feelings. Then Asagi decides that after work, he'll do something for her, because he's determined to knock Mercia's socks off with a killer surprise. He finally made it to the market tents everywhere, packed with every kind of goods you could imagine. He paid for a spot, pitched his tent, and now the real work begins, laying out the goods. Asagi beamed at how perfectly he'd stacked everything, fresh veggies and fruit lined up on the shelves like a masterpiece. But Naya wasn't impressed in the slightest, because she insisted the produce should look way more beautiful than that. The girl stared at the counter's look and cringed. It was nothing appealing at all. Mercia and Asagi figured it was all ridiculously simple, and claimed their fruits were insanely tasty, and, yeah, you could tell just by how the counter looked. Nia's face tightened with pure displeasure. She wanted the boys to finally get it. The buyers had zero clue how damn delicious the fruits and veggies from their farm really were, so she pushed that message to them as clearly as she could. Mercia and Asagi stared in disbelief, like the whole plan had just lit up in their heads and it hit them that they never saw it coming before. Then, Ine immediately broke it down, telling them exactly how to handle what was happening at the counter. The girl inspected the fruit and veggie boxes like she was hunting for the perfect pick, and Nea pushed the idea, don't just serve the produce, serve fruit juice too. Luckily, Isagi had a blender with him. Nia figured pretty containers would make the meal shine. Then Mercia showed up with a whole stash of amazing village baskets, and suddenly everything looked 10 times better. Nea grabbed a bunch of fruits and piled them together right in front of everyone, while Mercia and Asagi leaned in, eager to see what she'd cook up. She even snagged the whole assortment and dropped 3 silver coins on the basket. This composition was downright stunning. Exactly the kind of basket anyone would brag about as a perfect gift or souvenir. Naya beamed at her masterpiece, then sat tight and waited for buyers. While that guy couldn't stop wondering if it would ever get sold,